I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And we're here to find out, is Snowpiercer the greatest movie ever made?
Happy Ekaterina Bridge, you filthy ingrates!
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Chugga chugga choo choo!
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters around the world. Yes, you have your tickets, you have boarded train TGMEM Piercer going on the post-apocalyptic choo-choo ride around the world.
Yeah. We're boarding the rattling arc. I like that in your intro this time you said it's the only thing that matters around the world. Instead of
Did I say that?
You did. You said around the world. It goes around the world. No. That's fine. You don't need to retake it. We'll just leave that in. I think it's delightful, especially because, and this is maybe a question that I have about this movie. Does the train circumnavigate the world in 1 year? That's okay. Yeah,
I think so.
So it is. So the train is the only thing that matters literally around the world because it's going around the whole fucking thing apparently.
Yeah, the movie doesn't pay much attention to like the logistical implications of that, but I'm pretty sure it takes a year for the train to get around the world.
Right. And maybe it's not like doing the whole thing, but whatever the train's journey is, like it takes exactly 1 year.
Yeah.
I think I just had it in my head for some reason that it was also like literally going around the entire world. But,
yes.
Anyway.
I am David Skander. I'm joined as always by my co-host and guy who would be totally cool with eating people in the tail section of the Snowpiercer, Justus Burkett.
I mean, yeah.
I think we've already brought up the whole cannibal thing before.
Right.
So
I think to be completely fair, I would be in the Gilliam, like the John Hurt mentality though, where I'd be like, yes, we're all eating human flesh, but like, let's not be fucking dicks about it. Let's not like murder mothers to eat their babies. Let's like, well, you eat a little bit of me, I eat a little bit of you. Like whoever's got some to spare, like that's a good situation. I feel like I feel like that it would be the type of eating people that I would be doing. Yeah. I wouldn't be going at people with knives being like, come here, you look delicious. I'd be like, okay, let's all like, consent is important. Let's all...
Especially in cannibalism.
I can think of only one or two areas where consent is more important than in cannibalism. I would also... Okay, we'll get to it when we get to it, but like, I also might be chowing down on those bug bars.
We'll get to it when we get to it.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about it.
I am also wondering, because it's a pretty... they have pretty limited resources in the tail section. I'm wondering what the cooking situation was like for the human flesh. Were we just eating raw human flesh, or were we cooking that? That's
sort of what I think is implied. I'm pretty sure that they were just it was human meat tartare, if you will. Or maybe you pound it really, really thin, and do a little bit of what's that Italian? Like the really thin fucking raw meat. What's that called?
Oh, I'm not sure, actually.
It's, I don't fucking remember. Oh, the Podmaster has chimed in. It's called carpaccio. Yeah. So maybe we're doing some human flesh, tartare carpaccio. We're fucking with a little bit of that. Although, no lemon juice to squeeze on there and no capers or anything. So, but I bet if you find the right body to take that from, just the meat itself probably has plenty of flavor, especially right when they board the train, like at the beginning, before everybody's just only been existing on a diet of human meat.
Yeah.
Some people are still a little bit like corn fed there at the beginning, and you might like get a nice little bit of complexity of flavor from those early raw human morsels.
You get a fat guy. And it's
a nice marbling.
Some human wagyu. Yes. Justus, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, I think. I had listeners are going to get tired of hearing me say this. A busy, stressful week. Apparently, that is the theme of 2024 for me, because that's been every week of this year for me so far. But now that I've hit the weekend, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm in pretty good spirits. And even though things are busy and stressful, I feel like I'm not totally fucking everything up, which is a nice feeling, and not necessarily how I was feeling about any of my various duties, work or otherwise, in November and December, say. So feeling pretty good. I feel level, you know, which is nice. Feel like I'm in control right now. We'll see how long that lasts. How are you doing, David?
I am okay today, but
Yeah.
my week has been bad. Just straight up fucking bad. I started a new medication and it seemed like it was starting to work out pretty well. And then I started experiencing like chest discomfort, not chest pain, but it was like I am aware that I have a heart that is beating in my chest and I do not like how that feels.
Yeah, it's always concerning anytime you are acutely aware of one of your own organs. Heart especially, but anytime you're like, oh, hey, that thing inside me, that hunk of tissue inside me is like making itself known. That's never good.
Yeah. It was not good. So the first couple of days of the week, I was dealing with that during the day and sleeping okay at night. And then I called my doctor. We got the medication switched. I just stopped taking what I was taking. And while it was wearing off, then I started having insomnia in the middle of the night, coupled with the chest discomfort. So there was one night where I literally slept for maybe 2 hours and actually just woke up at 4:00 in the morning and stayed up. And it was bad. It was stressful. There was a moment there where I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, and I started, going down the WebMD rabbit hole like many of us do. So
Also probably never a good thing.
yeah. But that was the only really symptoms that I was experiencing. So I learned pretty quickly that it wasn't anything more serious. Thank God. But I'm off that medication now. So hopefully this new one that I'm on yields better results. And then on Friday, I just pulled my shoulder at the gym, and it's the one that I pulled around this time last year. And it's sore and it hurts and it makes me feel stupid and weak and shitty. So hard. It was hard to go to the gym with the medication acting up too, because I wasn't sure how increasing my heart rate during exercise would effect that would have on my body. So
Yeah.
and I was just so tired, so I didn't go. So I kind of crammed my workouts into these last 2 days. But I did do something else this week. Justus, have you heard of books? They're movies that are printed onto paper.
Fuck off.
And you read them. I just discovered them. It's wild.
I think I've said this on previous recordings, but I have read probably 3 books total in the last 10 years. I think 3. I think Devil in the White City, Dune, and Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which is like a little horror book. That's all I've read in the last 10 years. So David is roasting me right now. It's deserved, but I still don't appreciate it, for the record.
Look, I was an English major,
Yeah.
and I read a bunch during college. I crammed a bunch in terms of reading during college, so I really the joy of reading that I had as a kid just got kind of beaten out of me.
Yeah.
And
Studying anything that you're passionate about, I think will do that to
Yeah.
you. Where it's like, oh, hey, I really love this thing. And then you like go to school for it and you're like, oh, actually, I fucking hate this.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I actually made a concerted effort to start reading again, and I have a bunch of books on my shelf that I haven't read. And last year, I watched like 450 movies. Decided that I'm going to watch less movies this year and get back into reading. So I reread Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
Yes, anyone who knows you personally knows you've been reading Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
I read it in like a weekend, which is wild because it's one of the most challenging books I've ever read. Like when I initially read it a couple years ago, I had tried 3 or 4 times to get past like the first 100 pages or so and just stalled out. And then when I finally did finish it, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I just read. Because I had a lot of trouble understanding it and retaining the information. And I read it in a very short amount of time and understood a lot of it. And it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's so fucking good. And everyone says that. I don't want to, I'm adding to the cultural praise that this book has gotten, but it's great. It's violent as hell. It's dark as hell. It's super thematic and beautifully written. I've read a few of McCarthy's other books, and I don't know if this is like his best or anything, in my opinion, but one definitely, I think, if you've only read like The Road or No Country for Old Men, because those are popular, this is a lot denser and more poetic, and there's a lot of references and historical detail to this book that I found to be really compelling. And it's also just like, it's repetitive and it's very violent, and that might turn some people off, but if you're like me...
But not you, noted fan of horror and action cinema and also doom metal. So you got the repetitive, right? And you also like the violent.
Yeah, it is the cowboy doom metal. It's cowboy doom metal. And
fuck yeah.
It's wonderful. I loved it. On the other side of the Western, of how to interpret the story of westward expansion, I watched the miniseries from TNT, Into the West, which I've seen before. It's really good, but it's a little, kind of overly sentimental at points. It's a 9-hour miniseries that tracks the stories of various characters over this like 65-year period in these two families, a Native American family and a white family. And what's funny is they just kind of keep inventing new characters to show up to take part in different events of westward expansion. So it's like, we're going to introduce the character that's going to go do the gold rush for an episode, or the one that's going to join the Pony Express, and then later he's going to build the railroad.
Yeah.
But there's...
the very first Texas Ranger just showed up. What do you know about that?
And they're all in the same family. But it's a good show, and there's a lot of great actors in there. Josh Brolin shows up for a little bit. Lance Henriksen shows up. Matthew Modine. Alan Tudyk is in there for a bit.
Our boy.
Skeet Ulrich. My God. I was so happy to see that boy's name in the credits.
Yeah, we're passionate members of Team Skeet here.
Yeah.
Sorry, don't Google Team Skeet. That's something else. We love Skeet Ulrich.
Or if you do it incognito.
know what you're getting into.
But yeah, it's a good show. Probably something I wouldn't recommend to people who aren't super into Westerns, but I am, and I really like it. Yeah. Justus, what have you been enjoying?
So it's kind of lame because everybody else has already watched and talked about it, and it's already, had awards thrown at it, and the Podmaster and I just kind of came to it late, and then have been kind of slow working through it. Not because we weren't enjoying it, but because the Podmaster and I kind of work somewhat different schedules. She is on the radio very, very early in the morning, so she wakes up very early and has kind of a funky sleep schedule. So we don't always have a ton of time to watch things together. And if there's something we're both interested in watching, sometimes that watching is a little intermittent. We're not really able to binge. That being said, my media recommendation, if you haven't seen it for some reason, is The Bear. I have very much been enjoying FX's The Bear, which you can find on Hulu. I'm not trying to, free advertise for Hulu, but that's where you can watch it. And I know everybody else has already watched the show and talked about it a shit ton, but holy fucking shit, that show is so good. I'm not caught up on it. We're not caught up on it. We just started season 2. And the ending of season 1 really floored me. And so many great actors, so many great performances in that show. I think it's funny as fuck, which again is not a groundbreaking observation about that show. But yeah, just really, really been fucking with The Bear lately. Love that show. Very cold take. That's it for me this week, though. Other than, I did listen to a couple of the ambient Americana albums that you recommended on our Tootsie episode.
Sick. Okay.
Yeah, I really liked the Old Saw album, Country Tropics. I really thought that was awesome. And then there was is it called Lost in the Red? What's the band's name?
Oh, the band is Barn Owl, and it's Lost in the Glare.
Or no, Lost in the Glare by Barn Owl I also listened to, but there was also something with red in there.
Oh, an Evening Redness.
An Evening Redness.
They're-
I conflated the two names.
Yeah, and they're directly inspired by Blood Meridian, which is part of why I was listening to them.
I will say An Evening Redness was, of the ones that I listened to that you recommended, my favorite one so far. That last track fucking blew me away. If you're a fan of like movie soundtracks, ambient music, drone music, and you want to listen to something that is like super atmospheric, just a +1 to David's recommendations on those ambient Americana albums, because that shit fucks.
Cool.
So yeah, that's it for me today.
Yeah, and I haven't watched The Bear yet.
Okay. I didn't know you hadn't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, well, I guess you're the person I'm recommending it to.
Yeah, I genuinely, I don't watch a ton of TV, so that's another thing that I'm going to try to do is like there's tons of TV that I want to catch up on. So I watched a couple episodes of the first season of The Wire. So I'll add The Bear to my list because I've heard a lot of people saying good things about it, but I have some other things that I would like to watch before I get to the cooking show that gives people anxiety.
I will say I understand the people who are like, oh, this makes me so anxious, like it's like so like tense and like having that experience watching the show. For me, like I understand those dramatic and tense elements are there. For me, I just think it's so fucking funny. It is a comedy, but it's like a kind of a dramedy, right? And I think a lot of people latch on to more the drama elements, and that's kind of what they hone in on with that show. I haven't seen as many people talking about how funny it is, and that's really the thing for me with that show. Is like I'm laughing every single episode out loud. I would say definitely add it to your watch list.
Cool. All right, let's get into today's motion picture event. We're talking about Snowpiercer from 2013, directed by the great Bong Joon-Ho.
Yeah.
This is the only Bong Joon-Ho movie I've seen aside from Parasite.
I am in the same boat where I think we're exactly the same on Snowpiercer, where normally on the movies that we cover on the pod, one of us has like more of a relationship with either the film or the director than the other potentially. But with this, I think we're on even territory, which is I've also only seen Parasite and Snowpiercer. And you and I have also only seen this movie twice.
Yes.
And this, for the record, being our second time.
Yeah. I had heard about this a long time ago before I even knew who Bong Joon-Ho was. I was just seeking out low-budget science fiction that wasn't superhero movies or anything like that. And took me a long time to finally track down a copy. And I don't remember if I watched it before or after Parasite came out.
Yeah.
But it's been a few years since I've seen it, and like you said, this is my second time seeing it. So I'm glad we decided to take another train ride with this one.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah, he's an acclaimed Korean director of such films as Memories of Murder, Okja, I may be mispronouncing that, The Host, and of course Parasite, which swept the Oscars just a few years ago.
And I think this isn't a Parasite episode, so we won't harp on it too much. But I think kind of in my view, like deservedly so. I think that movie, like the acclaim that movie got, deserved. I think Parasite fucks, which again, cold take.
Yeah, Parasite's great. I'm due for a rewatch on it, but I was so happy. That was the last truly amazing moment in Hollywood. And then the pandemic happened. It was like, oh my God, Parasite won. Movies are back. And then the pandemic happened and shut everything down. And then it's just been darkness ever since then.
Yeah. It's true. But I mean, Bong Joon-Ho is a great filmmaker, and despite having only seen 2 of his movies, like I'm a fan and I want to see more. I really want to see The Host because that's a horror movie.
I feel pretty confident calling him the great Bong Joon-Ho.
Is it The Host or Host?
It's The Host.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's also a movie called Host, but that's a Zoom found footage horror movie.
Well, there's also, I think there's a Twilight ripoff, one of those young adult romance, supernatural romances from the 2000s called The Host too. Anyway, but I've really wanted to watch more of his movies as well. This is his first English language film, and it was inspired by a French graphic novel of the same name, but in French, and I will not speak that foul language on this podcast.
Snowpiercer.
And Bong Joon-Ho invented kind of a new story and characters inspired by the idea of the graphic novel. Sounds like everyone, and this is largely like an American cast, a British cast, but there's also Korean actors as well. Sounds like everyone was really jazzed to work with him on this.
Yeah.
Like Ed Harris, who is often known as hard to work with, was super excited to work on this movie.
Yeah.
John Hurt.
Oh man.
All of the great actors in this movie
Yeah.
were. It sounds like they had a great time working on this.
Which is always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris Evans was suggested as the lead, and Bong Joon-Ho had to like meet with him and talk with him to warm up to the idea.
Got to screen Chris Evans.
Yeah. But I think Chris Evans had a great job on this movie. Does a great job in this movie. Had a good experience on the set.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Chris Evans kind of rules in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see him do something that isn't Captain America.
Yeah, it's really it's nice to see him go this movie isn't necessarily like super fucked up in terms of like sci-fi movies or action movies, but it does have like a real edge to it, both like a socio-political messaging edge, but then also just like some of the like it's violent, but like some of the shit that's like talked about, like we were joking about the cannibalism earlier, like some of that goes into really dark territory, and I kind of like seeing like haunted Chris Evans.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, especially at the end of the film. We'll talk about when we get there. Some of my favorite performances in this or moments of acting in this movie come from him.
Yeah.
So this was the set was 100-meter long train cars that were built on gimbals to simulate the train's movement. And I think the set design in this movie is fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it more when it comes up. Famously, this is probably the only time we're going to say this name during this episode. Harvey Weinstein.
Boo! Fuck off. Rot in hell, you evil bitch.
He demanded that they cut 25 minutes from the film, and then after a poor test screening, he wanted them to cut more time from the movie. This led to a campaign to get the movie released because it was being tied up in editing due to this. And eventually, Bong Joon-Ho's original cut was released to theaters. However, the Weinstein Company released it through a smaller distributor of their subsidiaries, so it only played on a few screens.
Yeah, they like shat it out onto like 500 screens.
They basically put it out to die.
Which, I mean, this has to be on the list of it has to be on the list of the 500 worst things Harvey Weinstein has ever done.
It's on the list for sure.
I'm not saying it's high on the list because but fuck that man. Fuck him.
Yeah.
For all of the obvious reasons, but also for shit like this.
What a shitbag.
Yeah. Fuck off. Anyway.
Yeah, it eventually led to a wider release, and it ended up grossing $86.8 million on a budget of $40 million, and got a lot of critical praise. It was nominated for many awards around the world and received some of those. Eventually led to a rebooted television series
starring Daveed Diggs.
Yeah, Daveed Diggs of Clipping.
Yes, and also of Hamilton.
I just care about Clipping.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen that show. I wonder if it's any good. I feel like I haven't heard anything about it, which is not a great sign.
Yeah, it ran for 3 seasons on TNT, and then it was canceled.
Yeah. I know Jennifer Connelly's in that, right?
Yeah. She's, I think she's like one of the antagonists.
Yeah.
I think it's like a detective show.
Okay.
And I remember hearing criticisms when it came out that like the social satire of this was kind of lost by translating it to like just a sci-fi detective show.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. If I were guaranteed 200 years of life on this planet, I might find time for that show eventually, but given the limited amount of time that I actually have, I'm probably never going to watch it.
Yeah. So
apologies to Daveed Diggs and Jennifer Connelly and everybody else who is involved, who I'm sure does great, but I got other things to do, man.
Let's talk about the movie.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we have our obligatory post-apocalyptic movie newscast segment.
Yes, you say obligatory. Do you not like this?
No.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay.
It's just it's in every post-apocalyptic movie.
Yes, and I love it every time.
We have to start with newscasts about how the world ended.
One of the things. This is the first post-apocalyptic dystopian movie that we're doing.
First science fiction movie. Period. I think
on the podcast, so we can talk about.
Well, if you count Prince of Darkness, but whatever.
Right. That's more of a horror movie.
Yeah.
And the sci-fi angle is secondary to the religious angle, IMO. So it's more of a possession movie. Anyway, but
I said Prince of Darkness. His eyes lit up.
Surprise, motherfuckers! The Snowpiercer episode is actually Prince of Darkness Part 2. I didn't watch this movie at all. No. Just circling back to this being our first sci-fi movie, as some of the conventions of the genre come up, we can kind of talk about how this movie does those tropes. But also, it might be fun to, if we feel so inclined, to talk about our feelings on the tropes or conventions in general.
Yeah.
Which is why I bring up the post-apocalyptic, news, media describing the end of the world montage thing as just, a thing that I like in this type of movie. It always gets me hyped. Where I'm like, yeah, the fucking world ended. Now show me what's happening now.
Yeah. This movie doesn't show footage or news broadcasts, but the game I like to play is always trying to figure out what did they shoot for the movie and what is just news footage that they pulled from news sources.
I am pretty sure those jets with the contrails, when they're putting the chemical in the atmosphere, I'm pretty sure that is maybe just B-roll. I don't know if they shot that for the movie. They might have just pulled some footage of jets flying.
Yeah. But yeah, eventually what happens is global warming takes over the planet as it currently is doing right now.
That part's real. That's not science fiction. That's actually happening.
Yeah. They disperse this chemical into the atmosphere to combat climate change, and it leads to the planet basically freezing over and creating a new ice age.
Whoopsie, we battled global warming too well, and now the whole thing's fucking frozen.
Yeah. And this happened in 2014, and humanity's survivors boarded this train, basically in the last moments, and it circles the Earth, and we are currently in 2031.
Yes, and there is some opening text here. So there's the news clips describing all of this. But then there's some opening text as well. And this is opening text. Opening text, sometimes I'm like, did we need this? Could we have just gotten this from context, from dialogue in the movie? But when opening text is done very well, I'm such a sucker for it. It gives me the tinglies where I'm like, I'm about to watch a fucking movie. And the opening text in this is done very well. It's written very well. I particularly think that the line, "The precious few who boarded the rattling ark are humanity's last survivors," that goes so fucking unreasonably hard for opening text. I just love the way it's written is so poetic. It's biblical.
Yeah.
It rules.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So the film starts at the tail end of the train. In this, it's basically a slum.
Yeah.
In the back end of this train. And guards
kind of part slum, part concentration camp, really.
Yeah.
Is what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Guards come in for their daily checks, and they basically order everyone to sit down. We're just kind of getting introduced to a very brief section here where we get daily life in the tail end.
Yeah.
Chris Evans, who plays our lead character Curtis, and Jamie Bell, who plays Edgar. They
by the way, do you know how we know that their names are Curtis and Edgar? Because this screenplay suffers from terminal get-to-know-you syndrome, which is what I call it when every single character, when they're speaking to or about another character, uses their name every single fucking time. There is in the early part of this movie, there is so much, "Is it time, Curtis? Not yet, Tanya. Shut up, Edgar. Come back here, Timmy." There's so much of that where I'm like, okay, I got their names the first time you did this, and now you are hammering this name into my head so hard. Which is a minor gripe. It's it didn't take me out of the movie necessarily. It is just a thing I noticed because it's definitely a trope, and I feel especially a trope for some reason in sci-fi and fantasy. I think it's because if the world is more complicated, they want to make sure that you really understand who's who and what their relationships are to each other. They try and simplify that because the world's a little bit more complex, I feel like. Anyway.
Well, and they simplify the introduction to Chris Evans' character really well too.
Yeah.
Where everyone's ordered to sit down and he's still standing up. Takes him a second to sit down, and then he and Jamie Bell are kind of talking about and scheming and planning something.
Yeah.
Under their breaths. They also get like their protein bars for the day, and the guards are looking for someone who can play violin.
Yeah. And they go up to this this old couple kind of are like, we can play violin. Like, both of us used to be in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And the guards are like, well, you old man, come along with us. And he's like, no, you're going to take both of us or I'm not going. And they're like, well, we only need one violinist. And then they fucking smash this old lady's hand to basically be like, now only one of you can be a violinist. So, we're just taking the one guy. Like, problem solved. So this immediately lets you know the conditions that these people are living in. Like, it's like so brutal and so like it's a horrific marriage of like a police state and also like a military dictatorship, right?
And like confined to a train car.
Yes, I like how that this is even reflected in the costume design with these soldiers, especially in this early part in the end train car, are costumed very much as like a hybrid of military uniforms and police uniforms. Like, they're wearing like deep police blue and have like kind of police style tactical vests, but also have like military helmets and military guns. It just seems very, I think Bong Joon-Ho was really angry when he made this movie.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the choices like that seem like a huge middle finger to specific institutions, right? Where it's like, we're going to dress this guy like a mixture of a soldier and a policeman, and then have him do like the most horrific, reprehensible thing that you can imagine, which is like crush an old lady's hand who is an artist, right? On a beautiful instrument, right? And immediately, like, that's your introduction to these people. It definitely seems like Bong Joon-Ho has a lot of he's got a bone to pick. He's coming after some people.
Yeah, South Korea is a country with a pretty high class disparity.
Yeah,
and this and Parasite are kind of both the same movie in a way.
Yes,
because this is train as a metaphor for capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Parasite is a house as a metaphor for capitalism.
Right.
So in both cases, there's a lot of thought and intention put behind the costuming, the set design, the structure of the film itself.
Yeah.
And how, or at least it can be interpreted in that way,
right,
on how it comments on capitalism. And I think the set design here in particular is some of the best in the movie. Yeah. Where it is people piled on top of each other in these bunks that kind of form this little labyrinth in the back of this train car, and everyone's stuffed together, and it's dirty and it's gross and it's disgusting.
And it's also sort of poignantly, beautifully human,
yes,
too.
There's a lot of thought and intention paid to how people would actually live back here,
right,
and how they would like find a way to eke out an existence.
And they like decorate.
Yeah.
Right? Like I love how in some of the bunk areas, there's like keys from like a keyboard or a piano just like used as decoration on one of the bunks. There's like things hanging down. Like people have made the space their own despite their horrible conditions, which I think contrasts so beautifully with, we'll get more into detail, I'm sure, on the set design of the forward cars. But I think it contrasts so beautifully with the closer you get to the front of the train, the more minimalist and bare and soulless it gets. There's like a lack of like personality. There's a lack of humanness to the forward cars, right? And the closer you get to the front, the more pronounced that is, right? Whereas in the furthest back car, it's like kind of like a hellish slum ghetto concentration camp thing, right? But also it feels like the human spirit is expressed in the set design, and the closer you get to the front, the more it's kind of stripped away, which I think is interesting.
So Curtis goes to meet with Gilliam, who's played by John Hurt.
Yes, the great John Hurt.
John Hurt he lends every role that he's in, except weirdly maybe his role in Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He gives every role so much weight and gravitas.
Yeah, the man exudes like this is John Hurt when he was quite old.
Yeah.
Right. In Snowpiercer, he still has just so much presence. Like, you just put a camera on that guy and give him some words to say, and it's captivating.
Yeah.
Just what a fucking actor.
That's part of why I don't like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Is one of the greatest sins that movie commits is making John Hurt a bad actor somehow.
Yeah, that's an achievement.
But he's the de facto leader of the tailies, is what they call them, the people at the end of the train.
Yes, which, by the way, if I was living in the back car of a train, I would also fall in line behind John Hurt. I'd be like, I'm listening to anything this guy says. Have you heard him talk?
Yeah.
It's so compelling. I'll follow this guy anywhere.
They're like planning a revolution, and there have been revolutions in the past that have failed because they can't take the engine and kill Wilford, who's an industrialist who built the train, who runs the train. We'll see a little bit later. He's kind of treated as a god among the passengers.
Yes, yeah, he is a combination of he's a combination of Henry Ford, right, and like Joseph Smith, right? He's like, I am simultaneously creating technology that everyone's going to be dependent upon and therefore are going to be beholden to me, right? And also I'm leading you to the promised land is kind of his vibe.
Yeah. The idea is that they're going to try to take the engine, kill Wilford, and install Gilliam, played by John Hurt again, as the leader.
Yeah.
So we have another check where the guards round everyone up and they start taking kids for a medical check. We're introduced at some point here to Octavia Spencer, but she's in this scene here where she's kind of hiding her kid, and the guards attack her, and they take her kid.
Yep.
And they also take the kid of another man.
Yeah, this guy's name I think is Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when they take Andrew's kid, so there's like a lady who's in charge of like picking the kids that they're gonna take. He fucking takes off his shoe and, like this lady is George W. Bush, fucking beams this shoe at her head.
Oh yeah.
Which I love. Anytime someone does a George W. Bush, I'm chucking a shoe at you. Man, I wish those things had hit him in the head.
More people
It
should
sucks
throw
that he
shoes
dodged
at
them.
people.
Yeah.
It sucks, but it's also like I can kind of give it to W on that one. Like, you got moves there.
You do maybe have to hand it to him.
or
Literally nothing else except for his reflexes on dodging those shoes.
Yeah.
By the way, just very brief sidebar. One of the Podmaster's recent favorite things is just watching compilations of embarrassing George W. Bush clips. I think it's partially like a nostalgia thing, because it's like, hey, remember when that fucking idiot was president? To be fair, we've had a couple fucking idiots as presidents since then, but
right.
One of our favorite W clips that has like recently re-entered our personal like zeitgeist, just through these compilations that she's been watching, is, do you remember when he's being interviewed on that golf course and he's like, I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, we'll, be assured that we will stop at nothing to stop these terrorist killers. Now watch this drive. And he just hits the golf ball. What a fucking dickhead.
But again, and I hate him, he's a war criminal. That kind of rocks.
It's like, it's something the president would do in like an action movie that's like a satire of, it would be like the president in like a goofy ass, like Last Action Hero type, like, but he just actually did that. It's just, anyway.
I really like, I don't even remember the context of the clip or where he was interviewed, but he's like, I wonder if I can imagine someone like Osama bin Laden enjoying the
joy of Hanukkah.
It's just, I didn't say it right, but it's one of those where I couldn't predict the next words that he was going to say.
Oh man. Holy shit, man.
Anyway, back to the movie.
Yeah. There's kind of a nice thing here after the kids get stolen where there's a guy who like draws pictures like with charcoal because they don't have like any technology in the tail section. They don't have cameras like literally at all. So in order for these parents who just had their kids forcibly removed and taken up to the front of the train, to give them a little bit of like solace or whatever, he does these little charcoal pictures of their kids and gives them to them, which is like kind of a sweet thing, and sort of comes back at multiple points in the movie.
Yeah, he also like documents history. So later we see his bunk in the train, and he has drawings up of like past revolutions and other moments in the history of the train. So the man who threw the shoe has a giant Flavor Flav clock placed around his neck.
Yes.
And the guards and the guards in charge here, they say, okay, 7 minutes should be good. They open a small hatch in the side of the train and they stick his arm through the hatch to the outside of the train, which again is a frozen wasteland.
Yes. And this in the world of post-apocalyptic punishments is a really fucking hard one. I love this as like a post-apocalyptic dystopia punishment, right? Where it's like, okay, the arm that threw that shoe, we're gonna freeze it fucking solid, and then we're gonna smash it with a fucking hammer.
Yes,
it's sick.
And it's a really hard way to open this movie. It really draws you in.
Mm-hmm. And then here is where we first meet Tilda Swinton in this movie, who Tilda Swinton is dining out on this performance. Tilda Swinton is turning this performance into a 7-course banquet. She is doing so much in this role.
She's not also, I mean, she's dining. She's also serving.
Yes.
She's serving so much cunt.
Oh. Yeah. She's doing like this very heightened, like kind of Scottish accent thing. She's kind of mixing like a prim proper like British thing, but there's like a little Scottish thing happening there. And she looks ridiculous. She's costumed like a cartoon. And she's got like her hair is all like it's like super, it looks like it's a Lego hairpiece that they just attached to her head because it looks like it's like so hairsprayed and like moosed in place. And she is just, every line she delivers, I'm like, that is the craziest delivery I've ever heard. It rocks. Yeah. It's so good.
She has big glasses on, big fake teeth.
Yeah.
That the movie eventually reveals are actually dentures. She's got a very uniform on with like some medals. I guess she was influenced by like Margaret Thatcher and Hitler and Mussolini and kind of made this character an amalgamation. So she's so immediately hateable.
Oh yeah, she is a fucking worm in this movie. Like you're like, this is a fucking parasite. She is like the worst kind of fascist, which is like one who is not only a fascist but is also really fucking annoying. It's like, if you're gonna be a fascist, at least have the decency to shut the fuck up for a second. Which she never does, which I love.
Yeah.
I love that in the frozen arm punishment scene, she to demonstrate that she will not be shutting the fuck up. They're like, well, his arm's going to freeze solid in 7 minutes. So that's how long she has to do the speech, basically. Yeah. And she starts talking, and then there's translators who start translating what she's saying into other languages. And she's like, we don't have time for that. I only have 7 minutes. And like makes them stop translating so that she can yell at this crowd of people, some of whom are not going to understand what she's saying. For 7 uninterrupted minutes.
And her whole speech is basically about using this shoe that was just thrown as a metaphor. It's basically like, I think she puts the shoe on top of the guy's head.
Yes, while his arm is
out.
Yeah.
And she says like, the shoe represents disorder. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this woman is really reaching here. But some of the lines here, she says, on this train of life, we all occupy our particular and preordained position. And then goes on like, would you wear a shoe on your head? No. You wear it on your foot. I'm the hat and you are the foot. And other lines about how like all good things flow from the sacred engine, reinforcing this idea that everyone has this preordained place on the train, and it is almost divinely ordained.
Yes. When she finishes this speech, she says a line that I think sort of sums up this movie's message and attitude, right? Which is, she says, when a foot seeks the place of the head, a sacred line is crossed, is one of the things that she says. And I think that, like, for her character, obviously, she's saying, and crossing that sacred line is bad, right? You can't, that's a no-no, right? But I also think that it's like kind of a really ingenious piece of dialogue, because you can also read it the other way and be like, yeah, a sacred line is crossed. And it's like, it's good and holy and righteous to fucking cross that line if you're the foot, you know? I love every moment of this whole speech that she has.
Yeah, the social satire in this is, I think, very unsubtle.
Yeah. Oh,
and
totally.
This is probably a good time to just like talk about it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about how unsubtle it is and how a message is delivered and all that?
Yeah. So I sort of have mixed feelings on it, but I lean positive, right? I think the all the stuff that this movie has to say about class disparity, about the perils and evils of capitalism, about how revolution, while it is one possible solution, right, is not one that is without like its own pain, right? Like, it's not an easy or fun or nice thing to do, right? And so I think all of that's good. I do think that the movie like hammers it over your head maybe a little bit more than it needs to, especially in the dialogue. I wonder if maybe we could have less talking about the messaging of this movie and let the set design and the costuming and the pacing of this thing, where it like goes from action set piece to kind of quiet contemplative moments where you can like absorb what the meaning of what you've just seen, like let that set in a little bit, I think that those elements of the movie do a lot of heavy lifting to communicating those messages to you as the viewer. And I think the extensive kind of monologuing about it that happens from time to time is maybe unnecessary and is maybe a little bit of like a hat on a hat, where it's like, no, yeah, movie, like, I'm with you. I already got what you're saying, and now you're just telling it to me through the dialogue. But like, I got it already. I'm smart enough to understand what you want me to understand already. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of at a similar place. I think there's like a couple different ways to do this. There's the Paul Verhoeven route, which is you make a blockbuster first, with a social satire element secondary to it that is maybe
sometimes so subtle that actual fascists are like, hey, this movie rules.
Or it takes 20 years for people to be like, you know what? I think the space Nazis and Starship Troopers were actually space Nazis the whole time.
I think the bugs are the good guys.
So there's that route where it's like action movie first, social satire second.
Right.
The other route is you lean into the satire, you write it very specifically and thematically, and there's action along the way. And this is kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Where I wish some of that dialogue was a little stronger and maybe a little bit more subtle, because I think you're right. I think a lot of the subtlety comes through in set design, in costuming and stuff like that.
And even in the performances, like having Tilda Swinton's performance be so over the top, I think is a strong enough choice that then you don't have to have a bunch of people talk about what type of person she is, because it's like the performance has already spoken to what kind of person she is, right? But there's still some lines that like Chris Evans has about her to her, where it's like, yeah, no, like I get it.
Yeah. And with her costuming and her performance being so unsubtle, it gives you a sense of the world that you're in.
Right.
Where similar to Hunger Games, where it's like we're kind of leaning maybe a little bit into something that's more fantastical and eccentric in places. And that makes more sense when we get to the front end of the train and we start seeing how the other half lives.
Yes.
And the kind of costumes that they wear and the way their world is set up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish it was maybe handled a little bit more delicately, but I can also appreciate a film that is pretty upfront and clear about what its messaging is.
Yeah, and again, I think just to reiterate something I said before, I think the thing that works for me the most in terms of this movie's kind of social messaging and political messaging is that the anger comes through. I think this feels like a really angry movie. I think, like I said before, Bong Joon-Ho seems like he was mad as fuck when he made this thing. And I think that is the thing that's most effective to me in this movie, is the palpable rage with which the art is composed.
Yeah. And this contrasts nicely with Parasite, which is also an angry movie, but I think Parasite is much more subtle.
Yeah.
And
it feels like a more
satire.
mature anger.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So anyway, this man's arm gets frozen and then smashed with a giant hammer. And Justus,
Yeah, I know.
I want to see it.
I know.
I want to see it.
I do too. And initially, so this was only my second time with this movie, as we said before. I couldn't remember if we see it or not. And then when they smashed it and you don't see it, I was like, but you at least see the aftermath, right? And you don't. And I was like, I kind of needed to see those arm chunks.
See, and I thought you did. See, I seem to remember seeing that man's arm get obliterated.
Yeah, you don't see it. There's the whole argument of like, oh, what happens in your mind, like what your brain can conjure is more horrifying than anything that can be put to screen. And while I do agree with that in certain situations, this movie with this kind of fantastical over the top element that we were just talking about, and also like kind of the rage fueling this thing, I was like, could have shown us that fucking those arm chunks, Bong.
And
could have done it.
You know, we're sadistic fucks. Like, we love this shit. But I think if you had shown it, or if Bong Joon-Ho had shown it, it would have been a really like serious and poignant kind of period on this whole segment.
Right.
Where it really just sets the tone very well.
Yeah, and the scene is still great without it.
Yeah, and it still does set the tone.
But I would have liked to see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So after this happens, Gilliam gets up and says he wants to talk to Wilford.
Yes, and this is the first time. So we saw John Hurt earlier when he was like talking to Curtis. We now see him his full body for the first time, and he is a steampunk filth pirate. He's got a peg leg. He's got the end of an umbrella as a hook for an arm, and he's also walking with a crutch. And he looks like everybody in the tail end of the train looks like absolute shit. And there is a line delivery from Tilda Swinton here that literally made me guffaw watching it when I watched it this time for the record, which is like this image of John Hurt fucking hobbling, looking like the most pathetic, like, you know, torn apart sack of shit who's ever lived. Like, he looks like he's literally about to keel over and die. Tilda Swinton goes, she's like talking to him and she's like, oh, hey, Gilliam, like it's been a long time. How are you? And he doesn't acknowledge her. He just kind of walks past her without saying anything. And she goes, you look healthy. It was very funny to me.
Yeah, he wants to talk to Wilford, but he's not gonna, Wilford's not gonna come down here. Wilford's not gonna talk. So from here, I think we get more scenes kind of setting up the world here and how these people live, and the artist draws those drawings of the kids who were taken and gives them to their parents.
Yeah.
And we're starting to develop this plan here for the next revolt that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And they start gathering together these drums into basically a long, like, kind of battering ram.
Yeah. There's also been inside some of the goo blocks, the protein blocks that they eat. There's been some little capsules with messages that we've seen, and we're kind of meant to understand that someone from somewhere further along in the train, like someone farther ahead in the train, has been sending these to like Chris Evans. And they are sort of vague, like code instructions for what he should do next.
Yeah.
So that's also an element that we're kind of exploring here as well.
Yeah. And Curtis also thinks that the guns that the guards are holding don't have any bullets. He thinks they used up all their bullets on their last revolt.
Yeah, Tilda Swinton says to one of the guards that their gun is useless, right? She's like, put that useless gun away. And that kind of clues him in where he's like, oh, I don't think those are loaded.
Yeah. While they're scheming, an alarm goes off, which signals that they're going to have another guard check. And they decide they're going to move ahead with it now. So everyone gets in line for the guard check, and they start kind of shouting and starts, instigating a riot. And once chaos breaks out, Chris Evans breaks through the crowd, storms up to the front, and goes to the first guard he can and puts the gun barrel to his head.
Yep.
And there's a click.
He pulls the trigger. The guard doesn't even pull the trigger. It's Chris Evans pulling the trigger, which I'm like, that is so fucking baller.
Yeah.
To just like charge this fucking military guy, put the muzzle of his rifle to your own head, and just pull the trigger, being like, gotcha, bitch.
And there's a shout that goes up, they're out of bullets! And everyone just attacks.
Yeah. We get some great Octavia Spencer fucking...
Yeah, beating the shit out of people.
Yes.
She's getting in on the carnage.
Yeah, she also says, I don't remember if it's here or if it's after this first fight, but at some point she's talking to Chris Evans, and she's like, I wanna come help. Like, I wanna like come, charge the forward part of the train, because she's like, I need to get my son back, who was taken. And Chris Evans is like, no. And she's like, I'm stronger than most of these skinny ass soldiers anyway. And I was like, fuck yeah. I would not want to fight Octavia Spencer. But I love her wailing on these dudes. It's great.
And the barrels, again, are kind of like this battering ram, and they run it up through the crowd.
Yeah.
And it's basically going to kind of brace these these gates and keep them from closing, so that they can move throughout the car, throughout the different train cars. And there's really like the action sequences in this movie are almost shaky cam, but it works for me. There's a lot of like, it's very kinetic, and there's a lot of like punch zooms and really exciting editing. I think this movie is like a train.
Yes.
I think this movie is like a high-speed bullet train.
Yes. I think I thought the exact same thing watching these sequences, especially like with the shaky camera movements. I'm like, yeah, it's shaky because it's like you're like on the rails shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this editing style and the sense of action in this sequence is just like, it's just exciting and just moving forward. And another thing that he does throughout this movie, and it's very intentional, whereas a lot of times the back end of the train is framed on the left side of the frame, and the forward end of the train is on the right. So you always have a clear sense of where the characters are moving.
Yeah.
It's great.
So this first fight sequence, they kind of subdue all the other soldiers, and then they meet the final boss of the back end of the train.
Yeah, we have a couple final bosses. We have a couple bosses in this movie.
Yes, this is the first boss, and he is a giant, bald, like police dude, swinging like a huge, like, it looks like kind of like a kettlebell around. I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah.
And grunting like an ogre.
Yeah, they like pitch down his grunts to make him sound like a cave troll or something.
I was also thinking cave troll. He literally sounds like the cave troll from Fellowship. So it is very much giving like, this is like an unstoppable threat, right? And this is when we meet Gray, who is not a huge character in this movie, but I fucking love Gray. I think that this type of guy in an action movie is so rad, because like Gray's whole thing, he seems to be mute. He doesn't speak, and his body's covered with all of these tattoos that are just like words, it looks like. And he's like shirtless all the time. He's got like a big long flowy coat on. He's kind of like a skinny kind of like waifish dude, but he's like kind of like, like sinewy and, Yeah. And he like jumps on this fucking cave troll dude and just knifes him in the chest, and it rocks. Anytime Gray is fighting in this movie, I'm like, fuck yeah. And I wish we got more of it, to be honest.
He starts at the end of like the battering ram and jumps up on it and runs, and the camera follows him as it runs through the train cars and the gates. And then he jumps on the ceiling, wraps his legs around the guard, and stabs him in the collarbone or something.
Yeah.
And they take the big key ring from him. So now in the next car, we meet Namgung Minso, played by Song Kang-Ho.
Yes, and in the movie they mostly just call him Nam or Nam. Yeah,
and he's worked with Bong Joon-Ho a bunch of times. He's
Yes.
on Parasite. This was his third collaboration with Bong Joon-Ho in this film.
Song Kang-Ho is fucking phenomenal in this movie. I love this performance. I think it's so good.
Yeah, I wish the movie had a little more of it.
I do too. I sort of wish he was our main guy instead of Chris Evans, and I say that as someone who likes both Chris Evans' character in this movie and the performance quite a lot. But I'm like, and maybe that's sort of a monkey's paw situation where if I got it, I actually wouldn't like it as much as I think I would, because maybe the thing that makes him work so well in this movie is that he's not the primary focus and that you do get smaller doses of him.
Yeah, I think the movie would work better if it was more of a two-hander between them.
Yeah.
And it becomes that towards the end of the film, but in this first section, there's a lot of characters that we're following and keeping track of here, because we have some characters that are moving forward through the train, some characters that are staying behind.
Right. And eventually the movie solves that problem real quick.
Yeah.
we'll get to it.
He's the security expert on the train. He designed the security systems.
Yeah, it also seems like he's like in cryosleep or something.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the deal with this is.
The room that he's in is it's like a morgue almost.
Yeah.
And he's in a drawer, and they pull him out of the drawer, and he's like,
and use drugs to wake him
or
up.
Something. Yeah. So there's this substance called chronol, which is flammable industrial waste that is also like used as a hallucinogen.
Yes, it's plastic explosives, but also it's LSD.
Yeah. And he's an addict to it, so they wake him up by he literally just smells it, and he wakes up.
Yeah.
And they have translators because he's Korean and he speaks Korean throughout the movie.
Yeah.
They get little translators, and they need him to open the gates. In exchange, they'll give him chronol. And he takes out a cigarette.
Yeah.
He has a case with 2 cigarettes in it, and he takes out one and he lights it. And everyone is like, "Oh my God, a cigarette. I haven't seen a cigarette." And he blows the smoke in their face, and they all take a deep breath. And there's a couple just like long shots of him just sitting and smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
And he looks kind of ratty.
He's a little grizzled. Yeah.
He kind of looks like the main character in Old Boy, like, ratty long hair. He looks so cool.
This is the coolest guy who's ever lived. Nam in this movie, like literally as soon as he shows up, I was like, dudes rock so hard. This is such a dudes rock performance where he is just like not giving a shit about anything the whole time. He's like, everybody's fucking stupid. I'm smoking my cigarette. I look cool as hell. I'm sharing drugs with my daughter.
Yeah. And he opens up another drawer, and his daughter's in there.
Yes.
Yona, played by Go Ah-sung. So he wants 2 blocks of Ronol for each gate because she's also an addict, so they can both share them.
If you are giving me drugs to hack open doors, I will do that for you, but you also have to give my daughter drugs.
She's also clairvoyant.
Yeah, okay. We haven't really gotten to that yet, but let's just talk about it now.
Let's just cross it off.
Because it's such an interesting choice, and I want to know your feelings on it. That this otherwise mostly grounded sci-fi world, right? Because it's like climate change is a real thing that we actually know about. Mm-hmm. Shooting chemicals into the atmosphere that freezes the world, whether that's possible or not, I don't know, because I'm a fucking idiot and not a scientist, but it seems plausible enough to me, right? All of humanity being left living on this train, like, sure, I can buy that. And then this girl is a Stephen King character. She's got the shine. And how do you feel about it? Because I have feelings about it, which may surprise you.
I don't like it.
Okay.
And I don't like it not because it totally clashes with the world. I think like there's a way they could have incorporated it into the world. I don't think it just adds a ton to the plot. A lot of times it's like she's predicting what's in the car ahead of them.
Right.
And there's a couple maybe tense moments they get out of it, but I don't think it adds that much to the film at all. So I almost think they should have just cut it if they didn't have anything interesting to do with it, because I don't really think much about it is interesting to me.
I agree with part of what you said, which is that I don't think they do enough with it. That being said, I think it fucking rocks. I actually, this time watching it, I was like, this this is really ballsy and fuck yeah, right? Where I was just like, yeah, why not? There's a fucking psychic in this movie. I don't give a shit. Like,
yeah, I think I could have gone along with it more if they did more with it.
Yeah, I do think that there's a moment at the very end, which just on the off chance, because sometimes I say we'll come back to something later on this podcast, and then I forget to talk about it when we actually get there. I'm just gonna say it now. So at the end, when she wants to open up the floorboards to see what's under there. That is a moment where I'm like, oh, it's because she's psychic and she knows what's down there. And that's a moment that I think is both her clairvoyancy kind of becoming very important, because that's the turning point for Chris Evans's character. It's the moment where he decides what he's going to do, right? Is when he sees what's under that tile, right? And also it's a moment where they don't directly call out that it's her clairvoyance that's allowing her to know to do that, right? And you as the viewer kind of have to put that together and be like, oh yeah, like she's psychic. That's why she knows what he needs to see.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe I'm a dumb viewer because I got to that point and I was like, well, how does she know to open the
It's
floorboard?
because she's psychic, David.
I guess
she can see
Sometimes I watch movies and I'm dumb.
It's also an important thing that at the end of this movie, I think it's important that she's one of the ones who is gonna, start the new world, because she's gonna actually be capable of doing that because she can fucking see the future. So I think it's also kind of a nice element to put into her character, having her be like one of the people at the end who's gonna like start the new civilization, because it's like, okay, like this isn't a super pessimistic ending where it's like, and now they're gonna freeze to death. It's like, no, she'll be fine because she's got the foresight.
Okay.
I liked it.
That's fine. I think it could have been done better.
I agree that it could have been done better, but overall it works well enough for me that I am pro psychic.
So the next car up is basically like a guard, kind of like the guard barracks, and they have windows.
Yeah.
And there's
it's the guard barracks, and all the guard beds are empty, by the way.
Yeah.
Which should be a red flag that I don't think anyone in this group takes seriously enough. But anyway.
I think probably they think that all of the guards on the train are, were in the Royal Riot. Yeah. So there's windows in this car, and they see the sunlight for the first time. They also see the world. They see that it's still frozen. And this is one of those moments where John Hurt just like it reminds you why he's one of the greatest actors ever, because there's so much pain.
Yeah.
And like he just looks so exhausted.
Yeah.
Just carved into this man's face as he looks out at a ruined city that's frozen, and he says still cold, dead, all dead. And it's one of my favorite moments of acting in this film.
Yeah, I agree. That moment is like highly affecting. Yeah. And
I guess we could probably briefly talk about the CGI effects, because there's not a ton in here, but we do get some shots of outside of the train. We get shots of the frozen landscape and frozen cities and such through the windows.
Yeah.
It's not great.
No.
It works.
Yes. Yeah.
Is my take.
Yep. I 100% agree with that take. I think the CGI is shoddy in spots, but it never is glaringly bad enough to take you out of the experience.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of serving to tell the story, it totally does its job. So I got no gripes with it. I mean, it could look better. Some stuff made in 2013 and prior to 2013 did look better. So it's like we had the ability back then.
Sure.
But it's, it doesn't ruin the movie at all.
Yeah. And I think it still sells the gravity of this moment and other moments where you see the frozen world outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's serviceable for sure.
Totally.
So they run across Paul, who's someone they used to know, someone who was in the tail end, who was brought forward, who makes the protein blocks that they all eat. I love Paul.
Okay, yes. Talk about how you love Paul, and then I have something to say about Paul.
Paul is he's clearly lost his mind.
Yeah.
And just spends all day making these protein blocks. And he's kind of a disgusting little rat freak.
Yeah.
And I love him.
Yes. Bong Joon-Ho didn't just direct this movie, he also wrote this movie. Bong Joon-Ho got my fucking ass here. He fucking nailed me to the wall with this character. Because Paul's whole deal is that he is so in the zone with working, right? That he is not going to participate in the revolution, right? And he's talking to Chris Evans because they know each other because Paul used to be from the tail section, right? And Chris Evans is like, hey, we're going to the front. Like, come with us, right? And Paul's like, yeah, man, hell yeah, you go to the front. I love that for you. I support you, man. But I'm going to stay here and keep working because that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm Paul. Oh, God, we're all Paul. You know what I'm saying? Where I'm like, oh, yeah, like, we all kind of know that, like, everything's fucked and the world is ending. And Paul kind of knows how bad the situation is due to the nature of his work. You know what I'm saying? But he's just like, nah, man, I'm on my grind, right? And I'm like, oh, fuck, oh, God.
And his grind is grinding up bugs to be turned into protein blocks.
Yes, the protein blocks are bugs, baby.
And Chris Evans and I think another character see this happening in the machine.
The other guy is the guy who does the charcoal sketches, yeah.
Yeah. And everyone else doesn't notice. And as the protein blocks are coming out of the assembly line or coming out of the machine,
they're gobbling up
they're
their
just
bug
gobbling
bars.
them up.
These bug bars, by the way, they are not like, it's not like crushed up like dried bugs. It's goop.
Yeah, it's
like
Jello.
A Jello bar.
It's bug Jello.
Yes, which is so much grosser. And yet, I have a question for you, David. And this is now a recurring segment because we have already done this on our very first episode, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 with the People Chili, and on the Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2 episode with Tony regarding the gas station hot dogs. So I'm officially instating this as a recurring segment on this podcast, which is, would we eat this? Welcome to another installment of Would We Eat This? David, I want to know, would you eat this bug bar?
Yes. I'd eat the bug bar. And it's funny because they frame this moment as like really horrifying. Like you've seen the bugs getting chewed up and there's like intense music and stuff. You know what, buddy? Could be worse.
Oh, yeah. I am right there with you, my friend. I am curious to try the bug bar. It's not even like a thing where I'm like, oh, yeah, if I was living in the tail section and that was like the only thing, like, of course I'd eat it. It's like, no, like, as a viewer watching this on my couch, I'm like, give me a bite of that bug bar. I want to know what the deal with that is. I can't imagine that there's like a lot of seasoning going on in there. Yeah. So the blandness is maybe the thing I'm most afraid of. But I'm like, let me taste them bugs.
But they are gobbling it up. You know, they do seem to at least like it.
Yeah. Paul loves it. And he's like, I eat them too.
And they're also called protein blocks.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much protein you actually get from bugs, but as a power lifter, I'm interested.
Yeah. I've eaten a lot of pretty gnarly like protein bars and stuff. Like I can't imagine that this shit is any worse than some of just like the shit you pick up at GNC.
Oh yeah,
in terms of
just
flavor.
Like cardboard covered with chocolate.
Right. At least like this has probably got some zing to it. I don't know.
And I bet it comes out really nice and smooth. I bet you get some healthy shits.
Oh yeah. Although I don't know, an all gelatinous diet, like an all goop diet, maybe the shits are good. But also maybe just everyone's liquid shitting all the time in the in the back section, the tail section.
See, now I really want to eat these.
Yeah.
I want to eat the plastic bars in Crimes of the Future more.
Oh yeah. Give me them plastic bars. Those do look delicious. This has been another installment of Would We Eat This? Now back to the film.
So the plan kind of shifts here where they discover that the water car is up ahead. So they decide like if they just take the water car, then they have power over the rest of the train.
Yes. John Hurt even says, we control the water. We control the negotiation, which made me think, my train, my rattling arc, my Snowpiercer. It's very Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah. Instead of Dune, this is glacier? Snowdrift?
In many ways, the opposite of Dune. It's a planet covered in nothing but water. So their plan is to go ahead and take the water car. And as they're hacking open one of the, I don't think it's like the very next door, but it's maybe like one door after that. They're hacking it open, and clairvoyant Yona, right, is all of a sudden like, hey, don't open that door. Right? And it's too late. Nam has already like put the circuits together and the door slides open. And there are 1 million guys with axes and ski masks. Which, again, those bunks being empty should have been a huge red flag. You knew this was coming, guys.
And there's this scene here where they pass a fish up and they take their axes and they gut the fish and basically coat the end of their axes in blood.
Yeah.
This was a scene that famously Bong Joon-Ho and the shitty producer, whose name I refuse to mention for the rest of this podcast, who is currently serving jail time for assault and rape, and I hope dies horribly.
And apparently has a penis that is as wide as it is long, is a thing that I've heard.
Oh.
Yeah. And apparently the length is not impressive.
I did not need that mental image, but thank you.
Got a little chode dong.
They fought pretty extensively about this scene, and Bong Joon-ho just straight up lied to him to keep it in and said, like, my father was a fishmonger and I included in this movie as a tribute to him.
Which that fucking rocks.
And
Bong Joon-ho, my man.
Admittedly, I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of the fish is here, other than, and this is just my theory, is like, oh, here's food. Here's the thing that you haven't had.
Yep.
We are just going to waste it by covering our axes in it in blood as like an intimidation.
And
thing.
also sort of, I think, yes, that, and also the way I read this moment is basically like, this is what you are to us. It's like, it's dehumanizing them, right? I think it's basically be like, we are going to slaughter you like the animals you are, is kind of the meaning of this moment to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
To be clear, I fucking love the fish moment. I think it's great.
Yeah, it really played well for me this time. This is a movie where the shifts of power and the shifts of that surprise of what's in the next train car is such an interesting pull that keeps me engaged for most of this movie.
Yeah.
And when that door opens and you see all the guards, who look rad as hell, by the way.
Yeah, they're wearing like ski masks, but there's no eye holes, only mouth holes, which is really creepy.
Yeah, they look like medieval executioners, but cops,
right?
Or sci-fi cops. It's one of the most dramatic moments in the movie for me.
Yeah,
and it played super well for me this time around.
And there's like a big pause here between when the soldiers are revealed and when the fighting actually starts. Like there's a long moment of them just kind of like getting ready.
Yeah, there's a lot of like
facing off.
There's a lot of I would dare to say like spaghetti western stuff, like Sergio Leone.
I think you should dare to say that because I think you're right.
I'm going to say it. Sergio Leone famously was like, the build up to violence can be more interesting than the violence itself.
Right.
And there's a lot of that here where it's just, we're stopping for a minute. Everyone's kind of looking at each other and we're waiting for someone to, light that fuse.
And when the violence does come, it fucking rocks. The earlier fight sequence I thought was fine. This sequence specifically, there's a few movements to the sequence, but I really think every individual kind of movement of this axe fight set piece is some of the best action in the movie. I think it really fucking works for me.
I think this is where the movie peaks for me.
I agree. Yeah.
I think this is the best part of the movie, honestly.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, this is an R-rated movie. It's not a hard R, which again, I wish we had smashed that arm at the beginning.
But there's quite a lot of blood in this.
Quite a lot of blood splattering on the windows. Everyone's got axes and pipes and shivs that they've made, and we're just stabbing the shit out of each other.
There's a really great, in this first movement of the axe fight sequence, there's a really great moment where the action is, like David was saying earlier, is really frenetic and the camera's kind of shaky and moving around. But then it transitions into slow motion for a little bit here as we're tracking Chris Evans specifically through the action.
Yeah.
And there is a fucking banger of a kill that he has right here, where he gets one of the cop guy's axes and he fucking uppercuts a dude with the axe, like just embeds the blade of the axe into this guy's chin, and the guy's feet go out from under him and he fucking flies up into the air and lands on his back. And then Evans flips the axe around and embeds it in his face, which you don't see the axe go into his face, and I wish you did. But regardless, really gorgeous little bit of action right there. I really, really love it.
And it's also really dramatic, too, because that sequence is underscored with Marco Beltrami's, I will just say it, amazing score in this movie. I loved the music.
Okay, I'm glad you feel this way, because I was like, am I crazy, or does Snowpiercer have like one of the best action movie scores?
It's so good.
It's really good.
It's really like bombastic and dramatic when it needs to be, and then during this slow motion, basically it's like it's the old boy hallway fight, but slow motion and with Chris Evans.
Yeah.
It's really like subdued, and there's piano, and it's very like kind of sad and melancholy.
Yeah.
And again, underscores the drama and the seriousness of what these people are trying to do. And it's really cool to have that over what is, basically just really badass action.
Yeah.
It's badass and also sad.
Yes. And I think it fucking rips. So, also at one point, Chris Evans slips on the fish. that fish has been dropped on the floor, and he does slip and does a little pratfall on the fish, which is a moment that is a little absurd and weird, and I also like it. I just like that he slips on a fish.
The other moment that's absurd and weird here that I really like is they literally stop the fighting. Everyone stops, and an announcement is made. We're approaching, Katarina Bridge, and this is the bridge that basically marks a year or a circumnavigation of the world, and everyone stops, and the guards like count down to it, and cheer.
And the first time you watch this movie, you don't know what Yekaterina Bridge is or what it means yet.
Yes.
And so it's so bizarre watching it for the first time when all the guards stop fighting and then start like thrusting their weapons into the air and counting down 10, 9, 8, and you're like, what's going to happen when we hit 1? And then they all go, Happy New Year! Which is fucking nuts. And it's so good. And then Jamie Bell has a really funny line there where like all the guards are celebrating another crossing of the Katarina Bridge. And he just goes, I hate getting older. Which I think is really funny. Yeah.
And up ahead, they barrel through some ice blocks that have frozen over the bridge.
Yes, this is the titular snow piercing, right?
Yes.
The train is busting through, these like snow and ice dams that have built up on the track.
Yeah, so some dramatic moments where people are like bracing for impact, and the train kind of tips off the rails a little bit, and then Tilda Swinton appears.
Yeah, and while they're busting through the snow, there's a couple moments that I did want to call out.
Yeah.
One of which is I really like Nam and Yona, who are the only ones standing. Everyone else has like hit the floor to brace, right? And they're kind of looking out the windows, and there's just some very beautiful, like this is, I think, some of the spots where the CGI is the best, when they're looking out the windows in this spot. And some of the CGI landscape here was kind of working for me. I was like, hey, this is kind of neat. And then there's another great moment where Chris Evans and then one of the soldier guys have both braced on the floor, and they're just like right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And the soldier guy who's wearing like the balaclava with only the mouth cut out is looking right at Chris Evans and just grinning at him. He's like,
and his mouth is full of blood.
Yeah. It's like very eerie and weird. And I love that little moment. But yes, then Tilda Swinton comes back and enters with one of my favorite line deliveries in this entire movie, which is, Happy Yekaterina Bridge, you filthy ingrates.
I watched the movie and I'm like, Justus is going to call that line out.
I loved it. It's
You're right to do it. It's a good line.
Listeners, you probably heard it in the intro in the theme song for this episode. I love that delivery. It is so fucking funny. And she starts basically giving them a lecture where she's like, this is very disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, if not for Mr. Wilford, you all would have frozen to death 18 years ago today.
Yeah.
It's reinforcing the idea that you should be thankful for where you are. You should be thankful for the rich leaders who are guiding us through the world.
Yeah, all these tech innovators and their marvelous inventions. Aren't you just all so grateful for them?
Yeah.
Don't you just want to show them some appreciation for all of the wonderful things that they have enabled in your life?
And then she says, 74% of you will die.
Yes.
Which is a really cold-ass line.
Yes.
Curtis chucks something at her head. He throws an axe or something at her head, and one of the guards blocks it.
With a big hammer.
Yeah. And this is a great line that I love from her. She says, "My friend, you suffer from the misplaced optimism of the doomed."
Yeah, I wrote that one down too. And so then Tilda Swinton is basically, she's gloating a little bit here because they have a trick up their sleeves. The front end car soldiers do, which is they all put on little night vision goggles. And Nam says to Chris Evans, he's like, he says something in Korean and Yona translates. And he's like, what did he say? And she's like, he said, you guys are all fucked. There's a tunnel right after Yekaterina Bridge. And all the lights in the car turn off. And they go into the tunnel and it's pitch black. And so the soldiers with the night vision goggles can see. And the people from the back end of the car are blind in the dark, right? And we get a little night vision axe fighting.
Yeah. Right before they go into the tunnel, Chris Evans yells retreat, and then everything cuts to black. It's a great dramatic moment. And then the next thing we see is first person view from the guards as their night vision goggles turn on.
Yeah.
As the tailies are just backing up and kind of cowering in the dark and flailing their weapons.
It's
blindly.
very Buffalo Bill and Clarice Starling at the end of Silence of the Lambs. It's very like cat and mouse, I can see you, you can't see me, for this early little bit right here.
So yeah, there's a lot of sequences here of different guards attacking people. There's a really great shot of Tilda Swinton just kind of gleefully looking through her binoculars or whatever she has.
Her little
scope.
night vision binoculars, yeah. And just fucking, she's getting off on this.
Yeah.
This little freak is horny as hell right now.
And then at this point, Chris Evans yells out a command that is then echoed back through the rest of the train from other people. And it's a kid who has a matchbook.
Yes, he stole some matches from Nam earlier when they got him out of his little morgue drawer. So he's got some matches and he lights a torch. And then they start running the torch up like it's the Olympic torch. It gets passed off to one-armed Andrew, the guy who got his arm frozen off. And he starts running it up towards where the fighting is happening, and they light more torches so that there's more light. And guess what, bitch? Now we got light. Now we can see you too. And the fighting continues with the torches.
And visually, the stuff with the torches is so cool.
It
looks great.
All of the stuff in the tunnel, pre-torches, when we're kind of just getting little flashes of light from little windows in the tunnel. And there's moments where it's in slow-mo going across characters' faces. And then, once the torchlight shows up, it's just gorgeous to look at. Really good cinematography here.
Yeah. So the fighting continues. There's a moment here at the end where Jamie Bell's grabbed by one of the guards, and it's one of the bosses. The boss guards in this movie are dressed in suits. So one of those guys grabs him and has him in a headlock. And during the fighting, Tilda Swinton had been wounded, she'd been stabbed in the leg. And she's being pulled through the door at the end of the train. So there's a moment where Curtis has to look back and forth and choose who to go for.
Right.
And he goes for Tilda Swinton, and Jamie Bell gets basically stabbed in the back and killed.
He gets murked. Also, I just realized we forgot to mention it. I think it happened earlier, but I did want to call out another cool moment with Gray just because I like this character. I think it's before they go into the tunnel.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
But he does have, like I said, these tattoos that are words on his body. And at one point, he has one of those boss guys that you were talking about in the gray suits, the guard bosses, right? He's got one of them, with his knife or whatever to his throat. And he shows the guard his arm. And there's a word tattooed on it that says surrender, and then a word that says die. And he rotates his arms so that the guard can see he's offering him a choice. He's basically surrender or die. And the guard's I surrender, I surrender. And then it's really funny because he tries to tell everyone to stand down. And Tilda Swinton is basically you're not worth that. And he's like, oh fuck, okay, and he just gets killed.
Yeah.
Because he kind of is betrayed by his own. They're like, nope, we're not gonna stop this just to save you, man. Sorry about it. But I just wanted to call that out because it's a sick gray moment.
Yeah, and Curtis grabs Tilda Swinton and gets her in a headlock as well and holds her hostage, and she orders everyone to stop. They get out of the tunnel.
Yes, they wouldn't stop for that other dude, but they will stop for Tilda Swinton.
Yeah.
This is a hostage worth taking.
And that big guard who killed Jamie Bell just like breaks for it, like he's gonna bum rush Curtis. And Yona like flips up this piece of pipe with her foot, and he gets impaled.
Yep. Yeah, and then
That's pretty sick.
As he's dying, he's like putting his bloody hand on her face.
Yeah, and he's like sliding down the pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
It rocks.
So now we get to an interrogation scene where we're torturing Tilda Swinton.
And this is where Tilda Swinton becomes the sniveliest little sack of shit you've ever seen in an action movie. It is so fucking funny to just see her like whimpering and like simpering as this character, because this character is so hateable. And Tilda Swinton's just doing a marvelous job with all of this. It's very fun to watch. So basically she's like, I can lead you to the front of the train. Like, you need me, don't kill me. And Chris Evans is like, why should I trust you? And she's like, because I really want to live. And then this is where she takes the dentures out.
Yeah.
And turns into like, she takes the dentures out, and her upper lip is then just curled over her gums. And she just looks like a sad little turtle. Also, why does she take the dentures out here?
I don't know. I was wondering that too.
It cuts away immediately afterward. She takes out the dentures and says, Curtis, we'll move past it.
But yes, it's very weird, and I don't know why it happens. They also show her the drawings of the kids, and she says that Wilford took the kids. Wilford likes kids, she says.
Yes.
Oh, that's a big red flag.
Yeah. And John Hurt shuts that down right quick. He's like, oh, Wilford doesn't care about anything except his engine.
And there's more discussion here about like the engine. The engine is sacred. Wilford is divine and merciful.
Yeah. And it's kind of unclear whether Tilda Swinton's character is indoctrinated, like whether she's like a true believer, or whether she is just like spouting the party line here. I kind of think it's the latter, which I sort of like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. I mean, because she does say here that she wants to kill Wilford.
Yeah.
She's like, let's kill Wilford.
Oh, that's true.
I'll take you to the front if you kill Wilford.
Right.
Let me live.
So it's pretty clear she's just saying whatever she thinks will be the best thing for her in any given moment.
There's another moment here where Curtis wants to turn off the water because they're at the water car. And because, control the water.
Yep.
That whole thing. But she says you'll only be condemning your own people, and that the train breaks up the ice and the snow in the front, and then the water comes from the engine and from the front.
Right.
So they're not even controlling the actual source of the water.
It's only the water source for the people in the tail end of the car, because the people in the tail end of the car are drinking reclaimed water. That's like water that the people in the front of the car have already used. It's the front car's hand washing and toilet water and shower water that ultimately ends up as drinking water in the tail end, right? So basically them capturing the water car is useless.
Yeah. So the plan is to continue to take the rest of the train, take the engine, and bring Tilda Swinton along.
Yep.
So that night, Curtis and Gilliam share a little scene here where they talk for a little bit, and Curtis tells Gilliam to stay behind to guard the prisoners, basically the guards that they've subdued. And then a small group will take the rest of the train and then call for him to take command of the engine when they're ready. And Gilliam basically says, like, you're our leader now. They should follow you. I like this line where Curtis says, like, how can I lead with 2 arms?
Yeah. Which you don't really understand the meaning of that yet.
Yeah.
But John Hurt does only have the one, right? So you understand it on some level. You have a deeper understanding of it later.
Yeah. And the way I interpret it is like, how can someone lead if they don't know what it's like to suffer?
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
There's a line here where Gilliam says, it's better to have 2 arms. It's better you can hold a woman with 2 arms. That'll come back later.
Yeah.
And when you get to Wilford, don't let him talk. cut out his tongue.
Yeah.
There's a fun little scene here where they pose for a drawing for the historian who does the drawings with Mason, Tilda Swinton's character, in chains with the shoe on top of her head.
Yes.
That's a fun little moment.
Yes, very funny when they bring that back on her.
And then we start moving through the front of the train.
Yes.
We have a greenhouse car. And we have an aquarium car that has a sushi bar in it.
Yes, I really like the sushi bar sequence.
Yeah.
This is one of the moments, because I think not all the moments where this movie slows down and takes a little bit of a break from the action and the tension, I don't think all of them work for me. The sushi bar one does in a big way. I think that this is a really excellent scene. And I really like all of the people from the back car eating the sushi, and then Chris Evans making Tilda Swinton eat the bug bar.
Yeah.
I love that moment.
Yeah, Mason talks about how they only serve sushi twice a year because they need to preserve balance, and how each unit of the train, each car of the train has to maintain some kind of balance because of resources.
Yes, I'm going to attempt not to get on an enormous soapbox and rant about this for several minutes. As I was hearing that dialogue in the sushi bar scene, about how this train is a delicate ecosystem, and Wilford, when we meet him later, has a lot of similar stuff that's kind of parroting this as well. This train is a perfect, delicate ecosystem that must be kept in exact balance, right? Tilda Swinton even says, like, the word sustainability here, where she's like, it's like, we need to control everything in this closed ecosystem of this train for, like, sustainability reasons. And I think the cause of the apocalypse being humanity trying to solve climate change instead of by changing their behavior, but by just inventing some chemical that we can shoot into the atmosphere to be like, oh, we can continue burning all these fossil fuels and, living the way that we've been living without having to, like, cause any inconvenience to ourselves. We'll just fix this with, like, a scientific invention,
or hold companies responsible and limit their carbon emissions. And
right. Like, we, the people in power, won't have to do anything that's painful or difficult. We'll just invent some fucking tech gobbledygook that's gonna fix this for us, right? I think that, and all of what she's saying in the sushi bar scene, and then all of the stuff with Wilford at the end, ties this thematically together in a way that I really liked, where I'm like, as much as this movie is about, like, class consciousness and, like, revolution and all that stuff, right? It's also about how humanity's, like, gut instinct with any existential threat that faces us is not like, we need to examine the way we interact with our environment. It's like, oh, we need to, like, fix it by inventing more shit, right? I think that's like, Bong Joon-Ho is like, again, it's a huge middle finger to that idea, this movie. He's basically saying, like, no, like, the planet is bigger than the human race, and fuck you for thinking you can control it. There's a lot in this movie, I think, about, like, how humanity playing God is going to be the death of us all. And I really like the way that that's brought up in this sushi bar scene, with them basically being like, if we can precisely control everything, it'll be perfect. And it's like, you know what's perfect? Nature, right? And not the human imposition of humanity's idea of what's perfect in nature, but nature itself, because it doesn't exist to serve you. You're just one fucking species.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's not... That's not environmentalism. It's not sustainability to try and make the environment serve one species, right? And exist to prolong the life of a single species. What's actual sustainability and actual environmentalism is to say, let's, like, let nature take its course. Let's allow nature to be nature, right? And not try and harness it for our own survival. Just a thing I was thinking about while watching this movie.
Well, and I like the irony of Curtis being told this by a rich person, by someone who represents, going back to the class disparity thing, someone who represents the upper class. Where it's like, this, we've installed this order and this purpose to things for your benefit. We're doing this for you.
Right.
And in reality, this sense of balance that they've created on the train only benefits the rich. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. There's a lot of, I think, as much as this movie hammers home the social satire a little inelegantly in places and a little bit too much, there's a lot of stuff built in here that really, really works for me.
Yeah, that's why I was like, it's a mixed bag, but I lean positive on it overall because of moments like the sushi bar scene.
And this scene ends really with a really great moment where, Curtis forces Tilda Swinton to eat the protein bar.
Yep. And then the next big car that they go into is the classroom car. And the bangers just keep coming because other than the axe fight sequence, which I do think is technically where the movie peaks, the classroom car is maybe my other favorite moment of this movie because the tone of the movie takes a little bit of a shift here where it goes a little bit more into that like fantastical weird zone that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So they go into the classroom car. There's a bunch of kids in school and it's like very brightly colored. It looks like an elementary school classroom. And Allison Pill is the teacher and she is fucking crushing this little bit part in this movie. I don't know about you, but Allison Pill was a revelation to me in this performance.
Yeah, the only other thing I've seen her in, I think, is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and she's great in that too. But she's so good here.
Yeah,
she is my least favorite type of elementary school teacher.
And that's before she even starts shooting at people. But yeah, she's like just got this manic, bubbly, like artificial happiness thing going, which she plays it pitch perfect. I fucking love it. But yeah, so they're in the car with all the kids. Octavia Spencer and then the one-armed dad, Andrew, are like looking for their kids. They're not there.
Yeah.
And
one of the kids saw them brought through the car to the front of the train.
Yeah.
There's this little blonde girl who I wanna kick square in the chest.
Yes.
And she says, I heard all tail sectioners were lazy dogs who slept in their own shit.
Yeah, and Tilda Swinton, because Chris Evans can choose to just murder her literally at any moment, is like, no, that's not true. They're all very nice and just and kind and merciful. It's really good. And so the classroom erupts in song. Allison Pill leads them in a little song. There's a propaganda video where they talk about how Wilford basically invented the train and saved humanity. And it's very... it's all very Elon Musk. It's very much like he was an innovator who was thinking differently than everybody else,
and everyone made fun of him.
Yes,
and I love the moments where like the kids will chant something that comes up in the video.
Yeah,
it's there is this like again like this cult like devotion to Wilford, and it's cool seeing that in this sequence. Like the indoctrination starts when they're kids.
Yes, it's very clear that like they're fully being brainwashed.
Yeah.
And that's the entire purpose of this education. But then after the propaganda video, they sing a little song about how great Wilbur is and how they love the train. Wilford. How great Wilford is and how they all love the train. And the lyrics are so funny because it's like, what happens if the train stops? We all freeze and die. Like it's And
I love the shot of Tilda Swinton singing along.
Yes.
And she's like, oh, I love this one.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like, oh, really like boost the spirits or whatever. And so they sing their insane little propaganda song. There's reaction shots of the tail sectioners being like, what the fuck? Which I love. And then the New Year's eggs come. So Wilford sends boiled eggs as a New Year's treat, apparently, every New Year. And they come with wheelbarrows of boiled eggs like down the train and start handing them out to like all the kids and everything. Chris Evans gets one with a little note in it. And the guy handing out the eggs, I think it is very cruel to make the man on the train who looks the most like an egg himself be the egg guy.
His name is Egghead. They don't say it, but he's credited as Egghead.
That's not nice.
No.
He's a bald man with no facial hair. He also has no eyebrows. The man looks like an egg.
Do you appreciate the bald representation?
I
Is Egghead good bald representation for you?
Yes.
Personally?
Although, well, I mean, the guy looks fine. The actor looks like this is like a good character actor face, you know. The thing that I maybe don't appreciate about it is I don't necessarily love a bald guy being played as a huge sinister creep, which is very much this guy's vibe. I don't know. Bald guys aren't necessarily all creepy weirdos.
The violinist from earlier, from the very beginning of the film, he shows up here to play for the kids.
Yeah.
And it's a fun little like class traitor moment.
Yeah.
And the bald guy starts delivering the eggs to the kids, to the tailies. They move down to the end of the train. They go like through the other cars.
Yes, everybody gets an egg on New Year's.
Yes. And Curtis opens up the note that he found in his egg, and it just says blood in one word.
And then Alison Pill is delivering like a teachery speech here, right? And is like, oh, like, you know, when the train happened or whatever, lots of things went extinct. And you know what's something that a lot of people think went extinct, but didn't? And then she pulls out a gun. And just starts, she shoots Andrew in the head. So the one-armed guy fucking dies. Everybody else kind of like gets down or whatever. And she's like unloading. And I just love fucking manic, super happy teacher Alison Pill with a fucking machine gun.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It rips.
And Egghead also pulls out like an assault rifle and starts handing it out to the other guards.
Yep, and they all start kind of blowing away people in the tail section.
Yeah.
So the tail sectioners, the tailies have had the tables turned on them once again. They thought they had the upper hand, but now they're being blown away.
Mm-hmm. And then someone chucks like a throwing knife at the teacher.
I think it's Gray, maybe.
Yeah, and kills her. I think it is Gray.
Yeah.
And then the fighting sort of stops, and we see the TV where they were watching the propaganda film turns on again, and we see footage of Gilliam get executed.
Yeah. And then, since Alison Pill has been neutralized, Chris Evans gets her gun. And she was the only one with a gun in the car with them. Mm-hmm. So, like, they're safe for now. Mm-hmm. And immediately... So, actually, no, Tilda Swinton goes to get the gun. And Chris Evans gets it away from her, which is so funny because she's literally about to shoot Chris Evans. And then he disarms her, and immediately she goes back to fucking whimpering. And she's like, it wasn't me, I didn't know, right? And he's like, had enough of her shit, and he just blows her fucking brains out.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It rules. It's so good. It's such a good end for this character. It rocks. Yeah.
Now that Gilliam's been executed, Octavia Spencer tells Chris Evans, it's time for you to become our leader now.
Yeah.
In general, I think the first half of this movie is stronger than the second half.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And after the tunnel fight, after the classroom sequence, the movie slows down a little bit, and we see more cars, but that mystery of what's in the next car is kind of, we lose a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. But we see some other cars here. We see a dentist car, like a tailor, like these small businesses that are kind of in their own compartments. We see a restaurant, a barber shop, and it's mostly just the characters walking through these really beautiful sets for sure.
Yeah, but set design is still great throughout.
Yeah, but it is a slower moment here. We do have some action that comes here in a second, but I think the mystery of what's in the next car is lost a little bit here, and it's almost replaced with like, instead of there's almost a degree of like wonder to it,
right?
Where you are seeing how the other half lives,
and it is very like extravagant, and these people are living like the richest of the rich.
Yeah. I wish it was a little bit angrier.
Yeah,
I wish I felt a little bit more of the anger in this sequence.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, no, I agree. Like this, especially because we're just passing through all these things so quickly. And I know the movie's 2 hours long, and you can't like spend a ton of time in all of these cars, right? But I do agree, it kind of loses some of the urgency from the earlier part of the movie, and some of the tension here, which is not ideal.
But there's a sequence coming up here where the train goes around this huge bend.
Yeah.
And the guards who have now caught up to where the classroom was. They see the tailies ahead of them further down the train through the windows.
Yeah.
And they start sniping at them through the windows.
And the main guy doing this is like our main gray suit guy. He's like the main heavy of the movie.
Yeah.
This guy is the Terminator. He's such a fucking psycho, like such a cold, calculating psycho in this movie. Really like this guy, really like this performance. I really think that this bit with the train going around the bend and them shooting at each other from cars that are several cars removed from each other is like sort of absolute genius for a movie that's set on a train.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is actually like Bong Joon-Ho really thought about this, you know? It seems very well thought out. And the way it's executed, I think, works pretty well for me.
Yeah, it's something that seems kind of unexpected. Like I totally didn't expect this to happen, and then once it's happening, it's like, oh yeah, of course you should do this.
Right.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It is really cool. And yeah, so Chris Evans and this guy exchange some shots. Neither of them get killed. And then the gray suit guy starts his Terminator march towards the front of the train.
Yeah, and they make it to they catch up with him in a spa car, and now there's just like full on. The guards are just shooting them as they're in the waiting for the doors to close to get into the next car.
Yeah, the steam room fight fucking rips when they get into the steam room. Which I guess is like the next big thing here, right?
Yeah, and the music drops out for this sequence.
I really like this steam room fight. I know we were saying the second half is maybe weaker, but this is a strong point of the second half for me. Because I think this is effectively very tense, and I really like this gray suit heavy as a villain. And so I just love his big set piece here. It's like, obviously it's very atmospheric in the steam room. It's all steamy, and then there's like orange light. And all these like little doors that are like individual rooms in the steam room. And so the guy, the Terminator dude is like shooting through doors and like accidentally killing, like front car passengers.
Yeah.
Which one of the soldiers calls out and is like, hey, you just killed like a front passenger. And he just shoots that soldier.
And the other soldier he's with, he points his gun at him, and the other soldier is like, I didn't see anything.
Which I love. He does eventually kind of grapple with Octavia Spencer, I think, first. And she gets shot.
Yeah.
And then he's fighting with Evans and kind of gets Evans down. And then Gray, like he's going for the killing blow on Evans. Gray sticks his hand out and blocks the knife like with the palm of his hand, which is pretty rad.
That was a great moment.
Yeah. And him and Gray, I think, fight a little bit. He eventually does kill Gray, which is very sad for me.
Yeah, Gray gets stabbed.
And really slow. It's a slow Saving Private Ryan stab. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And it's a rough one, and very nice. Really builds up this bad guy for us.
And then the head guard is searching through the individual rooms of the steam room, and finds a front section person, this woman who's got a towel wrapped around her.
Oh, yeah.
And he moves her out of the way and finds Nam hiding behind her. And Nam jumps out and like attacks him with a pipe and chokes him on the floor with this pipe.
Yeah.
Or this axe or whatever he has in his hand.
Yes, and it is the choking. He's like got this like big old grimace on his face where he looks kind of like he's smiling while being strangled to death. Really excellent shot. Great performance by this actor playing this heavy. Good shit, right?
Yeah. The next car up is the dance club. And
Hold on. Before we move to the dance club. During the steam room sequence, initially there is no music, but eventually music does kick in. Do you know what this music is, David?
No.
It is the ballroom music from The Shining. That's what kicks in at the end of the steam room fight.
Oh, really?
Midnight, all the stars and you. Yeah, it's the Shining music.
That's sick.
Yes, and I was like, really fucking good use of that very recognizable piece of music. I thought it rocked. Anyway, now we can continue to the nightclub cars, but I did want to call out the Shining music.
Yeah, we go to the nightclub car, and it's just a bunch of... It's a rave basically, and everyone's rolling on Chronol, that that flammable substance that they also use as drugs. And Nam and Yona are just stealing them from other people. And you hear dialogue of like ADR dialogue of people just being like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
But no one gets up to like stop them from taking their shit.
But there are people who are like, there's a guy who's like, "I'm gonna kill you." Like they're like, "I'm coming for my drugs." You know, I do love Nam and Yona just being a fucking nuisance in the club car and just jacking everybody's shit. It's very funny. And they also steal some fur coats from some people as well. There's kind of like there's sort of like a rave room, and then kind of like a more chill, like we're all taking a bunch of Chronol and just kind of zoning out room.
Yeah.
And they go through both of those and just steal everybody's shit.
And then they reach the last car before the engine.
Yep.
And there's a bridge that's over like a series of gears and machinery. And then there's the door marked with a big W, the Wilford Industries logo.
Yeah.
And that's the last car before they get to the engine. And there's, Curtis is telling Nam, like, you need to open this door. And Nam isn't going to do it. And they tussle for a minute. And then they sit on the ground. And Nam offers him his last cigarette.
The last cigarette in the whole world.
Yeah.
And I love that, because then this transitions into Chris Evans's big monologue. And I love that he lights the cigarette and he doesn't even smoke it. It's the last cigarette in the whole world. And Nam's like, "You should feel lucky," you know? And then he kind of is recounting all this horrible shit that we'll talk about his monologue. But I just love that the cigarette just goes unsmoked. There's like not any shots other than when he lights it of him taking a drag off of it. And because he's kind of at a point where he's like, it doesn't fucking matter, you know? Like he's so, he just doesn't, he's kind of like been overtaken with nihilism here.
Yeah, and
to a degree.
This is like, this up through the end is legitimately great acting from Chris Evans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is a good actor, but I don't think has had a lot of great opportunities aside from the Captain America movies and the Avengers movies.
I would really like to see another Chris Evans action vehicle after watching Snowpiercer again for the second time. You know, I think of the Marvel movies I've seen, which is not a ton, but I've seen a few that he's in, right? And he always works okay for me in the Marvel universe. But in Snowpiercer, I'm like, man, this guy's like a legit action star. Like, let's put him in more shit.
Yeah, the Russo brothers had him in The Gray Man, which was one of those Netflix action movies that they say is super popular, but I don't think anyone has actually ever seen.
Right.
So I would love to see him work. I would love to see him work with another great, not that the Russos aren't good directors, but like another real auteur like Bong Joon-Ho.
For some reason in my head, I'm like, John Woo should do some shit with him. It just feels like a good fit to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Right? Where I'm like, John Woo, like, get Chris Evans on the phone. Like, work something out.
But even seeing him do something dramatic again, like I know he did some dramatic stuff earlier in his career. It would really be cool to see him in a more dramatic role after watching his acting from this point and on to the end of the film here.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is Curtis's monologue basically about what it was like when they boarded the tail, when they were boarding the train.
Yes. This is the cannibalism we alluded to earlier.
Yeah. Basically, everyone just boards this train, and there was no food or water, and after a month, they were reduced to cannibalism. This is a really chilling line that I really love how he delivers this, where he says, "You know what I hate most about myself? I know what people taste like. And I know that babies taste best."
Yes, this is the dark edge to this movie that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, it really goes for it here.
Yeah, he sells the shit out of it.
Yeah. Great performance from Chris Evans here.
He tells the story about this woman who had given birth to a child, and as he says, men with knives came to kill her and take the child away. But a man stood up and offered to cut off his arm to stop them from eating the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And the baby was Edgar, Jamie Bell, who we haven't talked about that much in this episode, so I just want to remind everyone.
Yes.
He doesn't play a huge role in the movie, but
yeah,
that baby was Edgar, that man was Gilliam, and Chris Evans, was the man with the knife.
Trying to eat that baby.
And he killed Edgar's mom.
Yep. And this all sort of works for me. It's pretty affecting. And I like where it comes in the movie, which is essentially right before the climax, you know?
Yeah, and it's really heavy. It's really
heavy.
It's really heavy shit. In this movie that is dark, is also kind of fantastical and funny and fun at points. But this is a really sobering moment. And I think it reinforces a lot of the themes here about class consciousness and the way that, you know, capitalism pits poor people against each other.
Yes. Yeah.
It pits the lower class against each other in competition.
Right. And that's literally how it continues to exist, right? Like that's an essential function of capitalism. It requires the lower classes to fight amongst themselves in order to sustain its existence. Which I think the movie does a great job of illustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I've hated Wilford for 18 years. I want to open that gate and meet him and kill him.
Yes. And then Nam has a phenomenal moment. Song Kang-Ho here has one of my favorite moments of his performance of this movie. Just the scene between the two of them is awesome. And there's also a rad camera move here, which is simple but very effective, which is so Nam's response to this is he says, I'm not going to open that gate, right? Talking about the door to Wilford. And he's like, I want to open a gate. I want to open that gate. And he points and the camera turns from like a straight on shot of Nam to like track where he's pointing. And it's just such a sick, like slick little camera move. I was like watching it. I was like, fuck yeah, Bong Joon-Ho, like, yeah. And he's pointing at the door to outside the train, right? And then you get Nam's plan here revealed, which is basically he's like, he's talking about the chronal, and he's like, I think Chris Evans, he is like talking about how like, oh, you get high on that flammable shit. And Nam is like, yeah, that's the thing about chronal, it's flammable, right? And he's like, guess what, bitch? I've been building a fucking bomb this whole time. Like, that's why I wanted all this chronal.
He also likes the drugs.
Yes,
he also likes getting high.
He does like the drugs. And also, by the way, in this scene, Yona has gotten so high that she has passed out on the floor. So they are, in fact, doing the drug. But also, the reason that they were gathering all this chronal, both from Chris Evans in payment for opening the gates and also like stealing it from the club, is because they're making a big old plastic explosive, baby, to stick on that door and blow it open. And Nam's perspective is basically like, yeah, you know, we could take over this train and continue living inside this controlled existence that, you know, Wilford has built for us. Or we could just fucking go out there and see if we can hack it in the world. And his rationale is basically like, I've noticed the snow is melting. He says that there's a plane that he's been watching every single time they pass the Yekaterina Bridge. And he's noticed that the snow used to be so high that only the tail was visible. And now he can see the wings and part of the body, which means if the snow is melting, it's warm enough that they could survive. Yeah. Right.
And the other thing that's called out earlier in the movie is a group of 7 people outside of the train who froze to death, who revolted, tried to get off the train, and they froze to death. And that's kind of something that the Wilford and his cronies use as propaganda to tell people like
you could never
live outside. Yeah.
Yes, and also Nam does say that one of the people who froze to death, one of the 7 who escaped and froze, was Inuit and taught Nam a lot of stuff about like how to survive in the snow. So he also has that going for him, where he's like, I have the knowledge, right? And he's like, I know that it's like warm enough out there that we're not going to immediately freeze to death. So like, let's just fucking blow this whole thing up. Is his plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As they're talking, a lady from earlier in the movie,
the one who had the shoe hucked at her.
Yes. She has this big yellow blouse on.
Yeah.
She comes through the door and
just immediately shoots Nom.
Just shoots Nom.
Yep.
And takes Curtis into the engine to have dinner with Mr. Wilford.
Yep.
And
which is Ed Harris in a phenomenal bit of casting. I think it's
so good.
I think it's a real great choice to have him in this role.
Yeah.
He rocks.
He's so good. I love him and everything. He does a great job in this role. He really commits to it.
Yes. And the whole movie, you're kind of wondering who Wilford's going to be.
Yeah.
The first time you're watching it, because you're like, they're really building this guy up. Like I'm going to know the actor once we get there. And then the door opens and it's Ed Harris, and you're like, fuck yeah.
And he's like in pajamas and frying a steak.
Yep. And he's just being so like blasé about the entire thing. He's like, oh, hey, guy who's here to kill me. You want some steak? Medium rare? You know, like it's just great. He crushes it.
And Bong Joon-Ho, fun little tidbit here. Bong Joon-Ho pulled a J.K. Rowling. Not the transphobic thing. But he was like, I'm going to give you facts about the characters after the thing has come out.
Right.
So he revealed that Wilford's actually bisexual, and he's had sex with the woman. The woman's name is Claude. I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
The lady in this scene. He's fucked Mason, Tilda Swinton. He's fucked the teacher, and he's fucked Egghead. So that's his Dumbledore is gay moment.
Interesting. Thanks, Bong Joon-Ho.
Yeah, it's interesting knowing that and watching the performance.
I mean, when you see the upper cars, like the front cars, everybody seems like they're sort of living a bacchanalian existence, you know? So I just kind of assumed all of these people were fucking each other. But nice to have that confirmed officially by the author of the screenplay, I guess.
And I like moments where the character meets God.
Yeah, which is very much what this is.
Yes.
But it's God if God was a fucking tech billionaire asshole.
Yeah.
It's if God was Elon Musk.
I would maybe like it more if they hadn't drawn so many so many religious parallels earlier in the movie. But the set as well is it's like so high tech, and it almost doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like the engine itself is like this series of like rotating discs that's like just this tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the walls are like slatted, and through the slats there's just like circuit boards like in all the walls. So it's like the whole front car basically is like a giant insanely complex computer is sort of what the vibe is. And
Wilford's speech here, where he's kind of reaffirming like everyone is in their own preordained place and position.
Right.
I like this moment where he says, even where I am has its drawbacks. Sometimes it's noisy.
And it's very lonely. And it's like, okay, yeah, fuck you, guy who runs everything.
And we have to keep things in balance. And then he reveals that he's been coordinating population control with Gilliam at the end of the train through this phone system that they have.
Yes.
And that the past revolutions have all been planned.
Yes. They're all orchestrated to keep the delicate ecosystem of the train in balance, because they have to just have an event every once in a while that kills off a bunch of people all at once to make sure that it's sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because Curtis and his group got a little bit too far, that's why Gilliam was killed.
Right. They had to improvise a little bit to combat how good Chris Evans was at leading his revolution. And as a result, Gilliam paid the price.
So while they've been making their way forward through this train, it reveals that Egghead and the other guards have made their way all the way to the back and basically have everyone hostage. And Wilford calls him and says, spare 18 people to celebrate our 18th year on the train.
Yep. And they just fucking shoot a bunch of tail sectioners.
Yeah, and the thing that I think really drives this moment home is where Wilford said, he quotes the line that John Hurt said earlier about, when's the last time you got laid? It's a lot easier to hold a woman with two arms. Mm-hmm. And that breaks him, and he walks into the engine, and Ed Harris says, "Have you ever been alone on this train? I'll let you. I'll leave you alone for a minute." And this is just like an unbroken shot. It's just a close up on Chris Evans' face, sitting in like this section of the engine. It's just this like the tunnel with like the rotating discs. It's very peaceful.
Yeah.
And it is just him processing his whole. He says so much without saying anything.
Yeah, and it's really him reckoning with the fact that he's just been a pawn in this whole thing.
Yeah, and
right?
that someone who he looked up to was in cahoots with, was in cahoots with Wilford this whole time.
Yeah, it's great face acting from Chris Evans. I love when an actor can communicate stuff without words, just with their eyes and face, and he does a great job of that here.
Yeah, this is my favorite performance in this movie. This moment right here is my favorite acting performance in the movie.
Yeah,
I think he does a great job here.
Another one that I want to call out, we kind of glossed over Octavia Spencer dying, but while we're talking about good acting moments in this movie, she kind of gets like shot in that fight in the steam room earlier, and then she has like a little kind of last gasp moment where she basically is like, she wants to see the picture of Timmy one more time, and Chris Evans kind of holds it up for her to look at. I just wanted to call out while we're talking about great face acting. Octavia Spencer goes from like heartbroken to sort of peaceful to just dead, like eyes glazed over, no expression, like she has passed on. And then the camera holds on her for a really long time, just dead. And I was like, that's like really impressive, just from a technical standpoint as an actor, that she has to play like 3 emotions at once in one continuous shot while the camera's just in a close-up on her face, and then just be dead for several seconds and just not move or breathe or blink. And I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, that's a great moment. Thanks for calling that out.
Anyway, so back to the engine car. But Octavia Spencer, again, extremely cold take, really good actress.
So Justus.
Yes.
I have something to. I want you to follow me here.
Yeah.
This is a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I know exactly what you mean, and I agree.
This movie's a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
You're correct.
So Wilford gives Chris Evans another one of those capsules, and he says, "I have a gift for you." And he opens it up, and he looks at the note, and it says "train" on it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Wilford it reveals that he's been writing the messages the whole time.
He's been writing the message the whole time, so he's been orchestrating this as well.
Right.
But he wants to give Chris Evans the train.
Yes.
And put him in charge.
Yes. You little poor boy from the slums where you had to sleep with your whole family in one big bed. Now you get to run my chocolate factory. I mean, train.
It's a morality tale.
Yes.
About a young kid who comes up out of poverty, who his determination, his pureness of heart wins him control of a system put in place by a capitalist, an industrialist. It is a remake of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yes, and the train is the chocolate factory.
Yes, and much like Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, we do learn here in a second that the train does run also on slave labor. Because in the Chocolate Factory's case, that's of course the Oompa Loompas. You think those motherfuckers are getting paid? Absolutely not. And in this case, it turns out to be literal children, literal child slaves.
While this is all going on, by the way, the party goers from the rave car
they've made good on their promise to come get their drugs back from Nam.
So they're storming through the door to try to get Nam and going over this small bridge. At one point, a guy falls off the bridge into like the gears and gets ground up.
It's really good. I love that guy getting ground up in the gears because he was at the rave wearing like angel wings, and as he's getting ground up in the gears, like the wings are kind of sticking out in addition to his arms and legs. It's just a very fun visual.
But that's
also, by the way, we needed to see more people go into those gears.
Yeah, for sure.
Only one guy goes in those gears.
Definitely.
Big problem. Anyway.
But yeah, basically Wilford references this and says, like, you've seen how humanity functions without a leader; they'll devour each other. So I'm giving you the train. Yona goes to Curtis to get the matchbook.
She has woken up at this point.
She's woken up to get the matchbook to light the coronal to blow the door off the train open. And this is another great moment of completely wordless acting from Chris Evans.
Yeah.
Where he's just standing, trying to process everything. Yona runs up to him and he puts his hand out to push her away.
Yes, and it's a really good shot as well, because he pushes her away, and then there's like a wide shot of the whole engine car, and it's Chris Evans standing with Wilford behind him, and they're up in the upper level of the engine car, like in the engine itself, and she's below him, so it's literally like physically he's on a higher level than her. And it's very much like the moment where you're like, oh shit, he might like do it. Like he might like take Wilford up on running the train and become like a class traitor himself. And it's cool that he's like visually elevated above her in that moment.
Yeah, there's a message here about how like absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Class traitor themes, like you said. And it's also like the idea of even with someone who has good intentions and power, like do we continue with the system? Do we continue with capitalism?
Right.
And I think the narrative that is certainly pushed here in America is, well, the alternative to capitalism is anarchism or socialism,
chaos,
and we intentionally try to scare people with and say that the alternative will just only lead to more suffering.
Yeah.
But what if we broke the system?
Right.
And that's Nam's whole philosophy. That's Yona's philosophy.
Right.
Here.
Is basically just burn it all down and start again.
Right.
So then when Yona is pushed away, she then starts, because she came to Chris Evans for the match and he's not giving it to her. She then, in a moment of clairvoyance, is like, I know what will convince him, right? And she starts going at this tile on the floor with a fork. And he realizes she's trying to get under there, and he knows she's psychic. So he comes and pries the tile open, like helps her pry it open. And in there is Timmy, Octavia Spencer's kid. And he's like pulling gunk out of the machinery of the train. And he's got like his head shaved. He's like skeletally thin. Mm-hmm. He's like not wearing a shirt. He's just kind of in rags.
Yeah.
And Ed Harris, as Wilford, tries to play this off as something that is totally chill. He's basically like, oh yeah, components of the machinery eventually, go kaput, and we got to replace some those elements of the process manually, and you need a really small body to get in there. So yeah, we steal kids from the tail section for slave labor. You're cool with that, right? And immediately Chris Evans is like, fuck you, and punches him a bunch of times, which is great, and gives Yona the match.
Yeah.
And is like, do it.
And
right?
then
Because that's the moment where he realizes the system is irreconcilably broken.
And then he literally sacrifices himself. It's literally him throwing his body on the gears of the machine.
And it's symbolic because it's an arm.
Because he sticks his arm through the hole in the floor and stops some of the gears of the machinery so he can reach Timmy and pull him out.
Yeah.
The door to the engine won't close. So and they're about to set the bomb off. So Yona and Nam run into the engine, and Curtis and Nam basically hug with Yona and Timmy in between them to like block them from the blast.
Yeah.
And I love right before the it blows up, Wilford just goes, nice.
It's a really good delivery from Ed Harris. It's a great last line for this character. It rocks.
And the train blows up. We get a really good derailing sequence.
Yeah, this is some of the better CGI in the movie, is the train derailing. So the explosion isn't what derails the train. It actually causes an avalanche that then knocks the train off the tracks. And I like that the cars, because the train's so long, some of them end up in kind of different spots. Like some of them kind of roll down a hill. Some of them end up just off the track. There's like a few towards the front that kind of all end up together. And I like the idea that we're kind of like seeding humanity a little bit here. Like there's going to be survivors from all of those cars, and we might get little pockets in this whatever post-apocalyptic world follows this train derailment.
And Yona and Timmy are in those big fur coats that they picked up earlier. They step outside the train, and they see a polar bear.
Yes, proving that not all life is extinct.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, there is some glimmer of hope that they're going to be able to continue life outside the train because there's living things out there. If there's a predator, there must be prey animals.
Yeah.
Right? That polar bear is eating something.
The implication is kind of like it might be eating those kids later, but I know what he meant. But I'm
Yeah.
like, you know,
It's
that polar bear's probably hungry.
It's supposed to be hopeful, but yeah, maybe Timmy's not long for this world.
And that's Snowpiercer, baby.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie.
Justice.
Yes.
Justice.
Yes.
Is Snowpiercer the greatest movie ever made?
David, I actually didn't put my verdict in my notes this time because as I was watching this movie, I was like, this is either going to be a soft yes or a soft no, right? It's either going to be like just barely, it's kind of in the middle for me, you know? So I was like, I'm not going to write it down. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to reflect on my feelings about the movie as we talk. And by the end, I will have a verdict. And I do. And ultimately, where I'm landing on Snowpiercer on this second watch is the softest of no's. It's not the greatest movie ever made. However, it's a really good fucking movie. It's really fun. It's really thoughtful. It's so creative. It's so inventive. The set design, production design in general, you know, the costumes, all fantastic. Score is great. Performances are great. I think the problem with this movie, other than the CGI not being so great, which isn't that huge of a problem, is that it does occasionally overstate its message. And I think there are moments where this thing drags just a tiny bit, especially in the latter half, right? And I think that those hold it back like just a tad for me. But this is a movie that like I think I'll go back to again. I've watched it twice, and I think I want to watch it more times than that in the future, you know? It rocks. There's a lot of good action here. Some of the stuff I wish was bloodier or gorier because I'm a fucking freak ass.
Yeah, I really want to see that arm get smashed.
Right. But like in terms of sci-fi action, you're pretty golden in a lot of these fight sequences. And yeah, I mean, I think what the movie has to say, it says in a way that is a lot of the time very elegant, right? I don't want to harp too much on the movie kind of like beating you over the head with the message, because I think that while that's a weakness, it's not a big weakness. And I think that the moments where the message really does effectively land are like really rad and like good shit from a sci-fi action movie. I think Bong Joon-Ho is a super talented director, and I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that proves that, you know, the tunnel sequence, all the stuff with the torches, and then also, you know, a lot of how the fights are shot and all that stuff. And also the time that he takes to just let the camera focus on the characters' faces in those more introspective moments. All handled really well. Not the greatest movie ever made, but a really fucking good movie, and one that our listeners should watch if they haven't seen it. David, is Snowpiercer the greatest movie ever made?
I like what you said. Yeah, you should definitely watch this if you haven't seen it. And I think this is maybe one of the more underrated science fiction films of recent memory. It's one that the first time I watched it, I really liked it. I think I liked it even more this time around.
Yeah, same. Second time was better with
for sure. Yeah, and I agree. I think the messaging is a little ham-fisted in points, and I wish it was delivered a little bit more elegantly. But I also think a lot of just the messaging is just inherent in like the set design and the structure of the film and character philosophies and stuff like that. And I think it has some great performances. I love Chris Evans in this. Chris Evans nails this movie. He nails this character. He nails this movie so well. He's the Hollywood leading man that you can get behind, but he has just enough moments of really great humanity to flesh him out a little bit more. It's a beautiful film in a lot of places. It has some great action and great violence. And I love that this movie feels like an adventure.
Yeah.
I remember when I would watch the Indiana Jones movies as a kid, and they felt like they lasted for 6 hours in the best way possible, where I looked back at the end and we had just been on this huge, giant journey, and where we started was a totally different place than where we ended up.
Right. It's epic.
I love that about this movie.
Yeah.
It has such a great sense of forward momentum and excitement until it slows down and we lose some of that. And I wish that second half was stronger, because I love the first half so much, and I love plans being subverted by other plans and the shifts of power between the guards and the tailies. That's such a great way to structure the action in that first half that I wish we just had something a little bit better to latch onto in the second half. You know, stronger cars, stronger characters, stronger moments in that second half of the film. So for all those reasons, I'm going to say this is a great movie, but not the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah. But listeners, especially listeners who are huge Snowpiercer fans, I think we made it clear that we really like this movie. It's not the greatest movie ever made, but like that doesn't mean it's not worth your time.
Yeah.
It
kicks
rocks.
ass.
It kicks ass.
Watch it. Justus.
Yes.
What do we talk about next week?
Well, next week, I'm currently texting the Podmaster to come here.
I'll do that.
So next week, what we're doing is beginning a theme month on the show. And neither of us know what the theme month is going to be yet, because the way that we have decided to do this is you have come up with a theme month.
Yes.
And I have come up with a theme month. And we're going to flip a coin. We're actually going to have an impartial party, the Podmaster, flip a coin to decide which theme month we are going to be doing for the month of February. And when the coin flip occurs, which will be in just a moment here, we are going to give you the entire slate of movies for the month. So you'll know all 4 movies for February once the coin flip has been decided.
And whoever loses, they'll do their theme month later in this year. We haven't figured out when yet.
Yeah,
that'll come
some
up
other
later.
time. We will both get to do our theme months. The coin flip is just to decide who gets to do theirs first.
And we've discussed some ideas, and I have an inkling what yours might be if you get it.
I have an inkling of what yours might be too, but I think maybe less of an inkling than you have of mine. I think I'm just easier to read generally as a human being. I'm also stupider and simpler than you are, so there's less possible options in my brain for things that I could choose. We got the coin here. It's the Papa Emeritus coin, which is official swag from the band Ghost that we got as part of our VIP package when we went to see them live. So Papa Emeritus of the band Ghost will decide our fate. Heads or wait, is there a clear heads or tails on that thing? It's not a conventional. Okay, there's a face and a not face. Okay. David, call it.
Heads.
It is heads!
Oh, man.
David gets to decide the theme month for February. I do not know what this is going to be, and I am excited to learn. David,
Justus.
What are we talking about in February?
February. Valentine's Day, love is in the air.
Yeah.
And love is in the air on the greatest movie ever made podcast. We are talking about a slate of Valentine and romantic themed films.
Okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be boats.
No.
I thought it was going to be dudes rock on the ocean.
That actually that was not one of my top choices, but that was a choice that I had.
All right, yeah,
because we had probably discussed it.
Tell me what we're going to be diving into.
So we're going to be discussing some romantically themed films, but because we're us, they're a little bit different than what people might expect. We're going to start off with a car fucker cinema classic.
Oh, fuck yeah!
Crash from 1996, directed by David Cronenberg.
This is going to be the first time I've ever seen this movie, and I am so stoked.
And then, because it's Valentine's Day, we are revisiting a slasher cult classic, My Bloody Valentine from 1981, directed by George Mihalka.
Yeah, bitch.
And then the week after that, we're gonna get really sad. We're gonna talk about a romantic film that's gonna make you question your life choices and question your place on this earth.
Okay.
Blue Valentine from 2010, directed by Derek Cianfrance.
Huge bummer.
Starring Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, who we love.
And Michelle Williams.
Our favorite Ryan.
And then we're closing out the month with the first film from my favorite actor in the world. The first film that we talked about on this podcast. I did not expect it to be this one, but it's True Lies from 1994, directed by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Holy moly, what a slate of films you have there. I am so fucking jazzed.
So
I'm kind of glad you won the coin toss. I had a good idea, but we'll do my idea sometime later.
Sure. I was really proud of this idea.
Yeah, no, this rocks. This rocks.
We hope that you all will join us for this month of love, romance, and bad feelings. We'll have some fun too. We'll have some fun, but it's our kind of fun. So we'll see you then. In the meantime, tweet about the show, talk about the show, review the show, recommend the show, spread the word. We want to try to build the audience this year as much as we can. So you guys are part of that, and we really appreciate all the support you've given us so far. Until we see you in February for Valentine's month. Later,
dipshits. I almost forgot to say it.
I could have led it up to that better.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.